small child stands before a mirror. At first they stare, puzzled by the reflection that gazes back at them. It's a face they know, but something about it feels foreign. As the child grows older, they begin to recognize the movements, the expressions, the emotions mirrored in that glass. But when did they first know it was them? This is the mirror test, a simple experiment in animal behavior, but one that strikes at the heart of something much deeper. It's a test of self-recognition. A mark is placed on an animal in a spot they cannot see. Then, a mirror is presented. If the animal touches the mark, it shows a level of self-awareness. For humans, it's one of the first real indicators of consciousness. At some point, we begin to realize that the face in the mirror is not just an image, but a representation of ourselves. The child begins to smile, curious, reaching out to touch their own reflection, feeling the echo of recognition. But here's the question: when did that self-awareness truly begin? The mirror reflects us, yet what we see is never the full picture. Our bodies are shaped by time, changing in subtle and overt ways. But is the self, the I we feel, merely a construction held together by fleeting memories, sensations, and reflections? What happens when we realize that everything we consider to be us exists only in our perception? The child, looking into the mirror, knows their reflection, but not all the forces that shape it, the genetics, the experiences, the invisible thoughts. They recognize the face, but they don't fully know the story behind it. This paradoxical relationship between the self and its reflection opens up something unsettling, the idea that the self, as we know it, may not exist at all. The I we claim is just a sequence of fragmented moments, a story we've told ourselves, pieced together from memories, reactions, and the ongoing flow of consciousness. Think of it like this: when you look into the mirror, you see your reflection, but what you're really seeing is a snapshot of an ongoing process. You, the person, are not static, your reflection is. And so, which one is the true you? The mirror captures a fixed moment, but the person before it is in constant motion. Our sense of self is built on narratives we create. But those stories are ever-changing. How can something that shifts so continuously be considered a fixed identity? If the child looking into the mirror is not the same person they were yesterday, then who are they, really? Are they the same person at all? The reflection isn't you. It's an image, a play of light and surface. The real you is something much harder to grasp. It exists as an ever-shifting collection of thoughts, sensations, memories, and choices, none of which are fully under your control. What remains constant? The story you tell yourself. But is that story the truth? If the child grows and changes, are they still the same person who stood before the mirror as an infant? The child in the mirror seems to be the same, but in reality, so much is constantly changing beneath the surface. What happens when the reflection no longer matches the self you know? This brings us to the idea that the self may be an illusion. Identity, like a reflection in the glass, might only appear to be solid. In reality, it's an ever-shifting construct, a series of thoughts that can't be pinned down to any one moment, any one feeling. The I you are is only a perception, shaped by memories, thoughts, and the stories you tell. The mirror test is a way of testing recognition. But what does it mean to recognize yourself in the first place? The act of seeing ourselves in the mirror is not just physical, it is an existential act. The mirror doesn't show the real you, it shows an interpretation of what you are, and who is interpreting. Is the self you recognize in the mirror the same self others see? Or is the you that exists in your mind a construct of ideas, of labels, of roles you've adopted over time? Each day, you look into the mirror, and the person staring back seems to stay the same. But is it the same person, or just an image you've come to accept? When the mind changes, when memories fade or shift, when identities shift like sand in the wind, who are we then? Can we trust the reflection? Can we trust the self that emerges from it, or is it merely another layer of illusion, a snapshot frozen in time? In the end, the mirror test doesn't just ask if we recognize ourselves, it asks us to question whether there is any true self at all. The I is a construct, an ever-changing idea, a story we tell, and when the story changes, what happens to the I we once knew? Perhaps then, identity is not a thing that can be found in a single moment, a single reflection. It's a journey, a dance of perception, constantly shifting, evolving, questioning itself. The child in the mirror grows, changes, learns, but is that growth the same self, or just another reflection? And so we return to the question, when you look into the mirror, what do you really see? A person frozen in time, or a fluid, evolving story, an illusion that grows more complex with each passing day? The reflection is not static, nor are you. Both are fragments, caught in an endless dance of recognition. In this way, the mirror test becomes something far more profound than a test of recognition. It becomes a test of existence itself. Do we exist in the mirror, in the reflections of those around us, or in the thoughts that pass through our minds, or is the true self something we can never fully see? You wake up in a place you don't recognize, with a strange sense of familiarity. You don't know how you got here, or even who you are, but you feel like you've always been. The world around you is new, yet the sensation of self remains intact. But is it really you? This is the essence of Locke's memory theory, a concept that suggests our identity is not tied to a body or soul, but to memory. John Locke, a philosopher from the 17th century, proposed that we are the sum of our memories, and that our personal identity exists as long as those memories remain. But can memory truly define us? Imagine you wake up one morning, unable to recall the past, the events of yesterday, the faces of your loved ones, all seem distant, as though they belonged to someone else. If you can't remember who you were, can you still be the same person? Locke's theory invites this unsettling question. For Locke, personal identity is about continuity of consciousness. If you remember a moment from your past, if you recognize yourself in that memory, then you are the same person who lived through it. But the moment you forget, do you stop being the same person? Is your identity built on the fragile threads of recollection? This theory forces us to reconsider everything we know about who we are. Are we simply a collection of moments, a thread of memories, linking the past to the present? If those memories fade, what happens to the person we were? Locke's theory suggests that memory is the key, but is that enough to hold us together? Think of the person you were 5 years ago. Do you feel like the same person? Your body has changed, your thoughts have evolved, your experiences have shifted, but your memories remain, connecting the past to the present. In Locke's view, it is these memories that make you who you are. Without them, would you still exist? The body may age, the mind may change, but as long as the memory of who you were persists, so does your identity. The person you were last year is not the same as the person you are today, yet you remain one continuous self. The trick lies in remembering, in holding on to the narrative of you. But what if memories are unreliable? What if they shift, blur, or vanish altogether? If memory fades or is altered, do we lose ourselves in the process? Can you still be the same person, even if your memories are incomplete or inaccurate? Locke's theory hinges on the fragile nature of recollection. One moment forgotten could tear apart the very fabric of your identity. Consider the case of someone with amnesia. Their past is erased, and with it, much of the person they once were. Yet they still exist in the present, still interact with the world, still have thoughts and desires. If they can no longer remember their past, does their identity cease to be, or are they still the same person, just unable to recall who they were? Locke's theory is built on the idea of psychological continuity. As long as the thoughts, experiences, and feelings we have today can be traced back to the memories of yesterday, then we remain the same person. The problem lies when those connections are broken, when the thread of memory snaps, and we are left wondering who we truly are. This concept extends beyond personal identity. What about the memories of a nation, a culture, a family? Is a society defined by the memories of its people? If those memories are lost, does the identity of the society itself crumble? Locke's theory implies that identity is fragile, built on the tenuous foundation of recollection. And what of the future? What happens when we forget the events that haven't yet occurred? If memory defines identity, then can we ever truly know ourselves without the complete picture? Each memory is a piece of the puzzle, yet there are pieces that haven't been placed. In the absence of future memories, do we remain whole? In the age of technology, this theory takes on new dimensions. Can we store our memories in machines, uploading our consciousness, preserving our identities indefinitely? If a person's memories are transferred, are they still the same person, or does the essence of who we are exist in more than just recollection? Locke's memory theory is a gateway to a deeper understanding of the self. It challenges us to question the very nature of identity, suggesting that we are nothing more than a collection of memories, a narrative constructed from the past. Yet, this theory also highlights the instability of identity, the fact that memories fade, distort, and vanish. What happens when a memory is so far in the past that we can no longer trust it? When the self we recognize seems like a stranger, trapped in a collection of half-forgotten moments. Locke's theory suggests that without our memories, we are nothing. But can it be that we are more than the sum of our recollections? In the end, Locke's theory invites us to confront the idea that identity may be an illusion, a delicate construct held together by fragile threads of memory. Each recollection, each moment that we believe is ours, might just be a fleeting reflection. And if that thread breaks, if we lose our grip on the past, what happens to the self we thought we knew? Perhaps, in the end, identity isn't something fixed at all. Maybe it's simply an ongoing story, one that exists in the ebb and flow of memory. And as we journey through life, we rewrite the narrative again and again, never truly the same person we were yesterday, yet never quite different, either. So, if identity is tied to memory, then who are you, truly? Are you the person you remember, or the person you are in this moment? Locke's theory tells us that it's the memories that hold us together. But if the memories slip away, if we lose them one by one, do we lose ourselves? You sit quietly, pondering. You think about yourself, the person you have always been. You know who you are, or at least you think you do. But what if you don't? What if the very idea of who you are is a fragile illusion, a fleeting construct? This is the problem of personal identity. From the moment you wake to the moment you sleep, you feel certain of your own existence. You have a name, a history, a set of experiences that shape your world. But who is the you who experiences all of this? Is it the same you as yesterday, or is it a new person every moment? The problem of personal identity invites us to question the very essence of who we are. If we're constantly changing, constantly evolving, then how can we ever be the same person? Is there a fixed you, or are you merely a collection of fleeting thoughts, memories, and perceptions that change with every passing second? Philosophers have struggled with this issue for centuries. One of the earliest questions posed was, what makes you the same person over time? Is it your body, your mind, your memories? And what happens if these elements change? Are you still the same person, or has something fundamental shifted beneath the surface? Your body as it exists today is not the same body you had years ago. Cells die and are replaced. The atoms that made up your body yesterday are long gone, replaced by new ones. If your body is in constant flux, how can you still be the same person? Are you your body, or something more? But then there is your mind, your thoughts, your emotions, your desires. These too change over time. Yesterday's thoughts are no longer with you today. Your desires evolve. Your understanding of the world shifts. If your mind is constantly in flux, does it follow that your identity is equally in flux? Are you still you? Then there is memory, the thread that ties the past to the present. Locke's memory theory suggests that your identity is grounded in the continuity of your memories. But what happens if you forget? If your memories fade or change? Are you the same person who lived through those moments? Or are you someone else entirely? And what of your experiences? They define you, shape you, yet they too are in constant motion. New experiences alter your perception of the world, of yourself. Each experience builds upon the last, yet no single experience can completely define you. So are you defined by the sum of your experiences, or by something else? At the core of the problem of personal identity lies a deeper question: is identity a static thing? Or is it an illusion, a fluid construct that we create from moment to moment? The more we examine ourselves, the more we find that identity is not something solid, but something intangible, something always in motion. Some argue that identity is simply the result of how we interpret the world around us. We create narratives about who we are, stories that we tell ourselves to make sense of our lives. These narratives help us feel coherent, connected, but what happens if we forget the story? Who are we when the narrative breaks down? If identity is just a story, a collection of memories, thoughts, and experiences, then what is the real you? Are you the story you tell, or is there something deeper, something that remains even when the story fades away? Perhaps the problem of personal identity is not about finding a concrete self, but about embracing the fluidity of existence. This question stretches into other realms too. If identity is not a fixed thing, then what happens when you change drastically? When your body changes, when your mind shifts, when your experiences lead you down new paths, are you still the same person you once were? Or does change mean the dissolution of the old you? Consider the idea of reincarnation, or the possibility of mind uploading. If you could start over, if your memories could be transferred, if you could live a new life with the same consciousness, would you still be you, or would you be someone else entirely, wearing the same mind like an old coat? The lines between self and other begin to blur. In a way, the problem of personal identity is about understanding the nature of change. Identity, when examined deeply, may seem like an illusion, a mirage that shifts with each breath. The more we look for a stable self, the more we are confronted with its absence, with the ever-moving tides of consciousness, and yet we continue to feel like we are the same person from moment to moment, day to day. We hold on to this sense of self as though it is concrete, certain, but is it? What if this certainty is itself a comforting illusion, one that we cannot shake, no matter how much we examine it? Perhaps the real solution to the problem of personal identity lies in acceptance. Maybe the identity we hold on to is not something to be defined, but something to be experienced. Maybe identity is not about finding a fixed you, but about recognizing the flow of existence, the ebb and rise of thoughts, memories, and perceptions. The problem of personal identity doesn't have an easy answer, but it forces us to reconsider everything we think we know about who we are. It challenges us to question the very foundation of selfhood, to embrace the possibility that identity may be nothing more than a fleeting illusion, a dream we return to every day, yet never truly touch. So who are you, really? Are you the person you were yesterday, or the person you are today? Is identity fixed, or is it a wave, constantly shifting with the currents of thought and time? Perhaps the question isn't about finding the answers, but about allowing the mystery of self to unfold, ever-changing, ever-present, yet always elusive. The problem of personal identity reminds us that identity is not something we possess, but something we experience. It is a journey, a dance of awareness, a story we tell, never fully written, always in motion. The more we search for the I, the more we find it slipping away, only to reappear anew in the next moment. The river flows endlessly, its current always changing, yet always the same. You stand on its banks, watching the water move and wonder, is it still the same river? The water that touches your skin now is different from the water that touched it moments ago, and yet the river remains. So what about you? Your body changes over time, like the river, flowing in a constant state of renewal. Cells die and are reborn. Your hair grows, your skin wrinkles, your muscles shift, and still, you are you. But is this the same body that existed yesterday, or is it just another version, another expression of the same life? We are caught in this paradox of change. We feel constant, and yet nothing about us remains the same. The person you were last year, last month, last week, are they the same as the person you are today? And if they are, then how is it that you change so much, so quietly, so imperceptibly? Think of a tree in the forest, its leaves turning through the seasons. Each leaf falls, replaced by another. Yet the tree persists. Is the tree the same throughout its life, or is it always becoming something new? Each moment it changes, yet it remains itself, enduring through time. Can you say the same? Our memories too shift with time. We remember who we were, but the version of ourselves we recall is colored by the distance of years, by the fading of emotions, by the changing lens of experience. What we remember is not the person we were, but the person we have become, shaped by time itself. The challenge of identity over time lies in this: we want to believe that we are the same, that the person we know is fixed, is constant. Yet our very experience of self is fluid. We know we are the same person who laughed yesterday, but the laughter today feels different, doesn't it? What happens when we lose our memories, or when they distort? If the memories that bind us to our past dissolve, do we lose the continuity of self, or are we still the same person, regardless of what we remember? The feeling of continuity may remain, but does it reveal the true nature of identity, or just its illusion? Change, then, becomes the central theme of our existence. Everything around us is in a constant state of flux, and so are we. The moments we live through are always passing, slipping through our fingers like sand, and yet we grasp onto them, holding them as if they define us. Do they? Your thoughts change from minute to minute, but they still feel like yours. The emotions you experience ebb and flow, and yet you are still you. But if thoughts and feelings are so transient, what is it that holds the eye together? Is there something beneath the surface, something that persists through the changes? Perhaps the illusion of identity lies in the way we understand continuity. We look to our past for answers, believing that the person we were must somehow anchor the person we are. But can the self truly be found in the past? Or is it an ongoing process, a thread that weaves itself forward, without ever truly stopping? Your body changes, your thoughts change, your experiences change, and yet the feeling of being you persists. But where is the you in all of this? Is it a stable thing, locked somewhere in the past, or is it a fleeting moment that we grasp onto, like a breath and then release? Imagine a clay sculpture, shaped by the hands of time. The sculpture changes shape with each touch, each press, each subtle shift, but is it still the same sculpture, or is it something else entirely? What happens when the sculptor's hands change, when the very form of the sculpture shifts beyond recognition? In the same way, we too are sculpted by time, by experience, by the countless moments that accumulate into a life. But if we are always changing, always becoming, can we ever truly be the same person we were? The continuity we feel may only be a reflection, a comfort we cling to, as the currents of change sweep us away. Our language itself betrays this desire for permanence. We speak of the same person, as if there is a fixed self beneath the surface, one that remains untouched by time. But is it truly the same person, or are we merely repeating the illusion of sameness, holding on to the idea of an unchanging self? Maybe in the end, the self is not something to be found, not a fixed object to hold. Maybe it is an ongoing experience, a fluid narrative that stretches across time. The person you were yesterday is not the person you are today, but the thread of continuity remains, just as the river flows, constantly changing, yet always the river. We cannot step into the same river twice, and we cannot step into the same version of ourselves twice, either. Each moment is new, each thought is different, yet in the current of time, we are carried forward, still moving, still breathing, still experiencing. The person you are right now will soon be a memory, a reflection of who you once were. So where does that leave us? If we are always becoming, always changing, then who are we really? Are we the person we were yesterday, or the person we will be tomorrow? Perhaps in the end, the answer lies not in who we were, but in the act of becoming, ever shifting, ever evolving, always on the journey. The river flows forward, and so do we. We change, we grow, we evolve, but in that movement, in that flow, we are still connected to something deeper. The feeling of being you persists, even as everything else changes, and perhaps that persistence, that quiet continuity beneath the surface, is what we call identity. In the end, identity over time and change may not be about finding a fixed self. It may be about embracing the fluidity of existence, about accepting that we are always in motion, always becoming, and in that becoming, perhaps we are never more ourselves than when we let go of the need to stay the same. You walk through the same door every day, yet each time it feels slightly different. The wood creaks under your feet, the air smells just a bit altered, as if the space has changed with each passing moment. But if it is always the same door, how can it feel so different each time you pass through? This is the paradox of change and sameness. It's the strange dance between the familiar and the unfamiliar. Every moment feels like a continuation of the last, yet when we look closely, nothing remains the same. The door is always the same, but you are never the same when you walk through it. Consider the moon, hanging in the same sky, night after night. It appears constant, unchanging. Yet in truth, it is in constant motion, shifting ever so slightly. Every time you look at it, you see something new, and still it remains the same moon. What then is change, and what is sameness, if not an endless reflection of each other? The paradox asks us to reconcile two truths, that we are always changing, yet always remain the same. Every moment is a new beginning, a new version of yourself, but as you stand at the edge of each new moment, the past still clings to you, holding you together, keeping you whole. How can you be both new and old at once? In the river, the water is never the same, yet the river itself endures. The flow of water changes constantly, but the river's identity, the essence of it, remains. And so it is with us. We are constantly changing, our thoughts, our bodies, our desires, but something deeper, something we cannot touch, seems to hold us together. What is that thing? Perhaps it is not a question of whether change or sameness is real, but how we experience it. Change is a constant force, moving us through time. But when we look at ourselves, we often feel that we are the same person we were years ago. How is it that we carry with us the weight of time, and yet never quite change? We age, we learn, we grow, but we also stay. Our thoughts, once new, become familiar. The passions we once had shift, but they never fully vanish. We look back on who we were and see a resemblance, a connection that seems impossible to sever. Are we the same person, or a collection of moments strung together? The paradox deepens when we think of our memories. Each memory is a moment in time, yet it too has changed. Our memories, like the door, are never static. They shift with our understanding, colored by the light of the present. We remember the same events differently each time, and yet they are still the same memories. What are we to make of this? Our sense of self is like this. We hold on to it, even as it changes. We tell ourselves stories of who we are, clinging to the image we've built. But like the door, the moon and the river, this image is never fixed. It is always in motion, always shifting, yet we continue to see it as the same, even when it isn't. Time adds another layer to the paradox. We live through years, seasons, moments, yet each day feels like the one before, and still we move forward. Every experience, every choice, leaves an imprint on us. We are not the same as we were, and yet we still carry with us the echoes of what we once were. Think of a tree, its roots grounded deep in the earth, its branches reaching for the sky. Each leaf that falls is replaced by another, yet the tree remains. It changes in a subtle dance with the seasons, but it endures, holding on to its identity. Is it the same tree, or has it become something else entirely with each passing day? The paradox is that identity cannot be captured by the moment alone. If we look at ourselves from one moment to the next, we see only pieces, fragments of a larger whole. But in looking at the whole, we see the same person, the same essence, even as each piece changes and shifts in its own way. And then there's the question of perception. How do we perceive change and sameness? When we look at ourselves, we see both the constant and the ever-shifting. We know we are not who we were 10 years ago, yet we still recognize ourselves in the reflection. Perhaps this is the essence of the paradox, that we are always both changing and staying the same. Perhaps the paradox lies not in the contradiction, but in the acceptance of both realities. Change is inevitable. It shapes us, molds us, but it does not erase who we are. Sameness is a comfort, a steady thread that connects us to the past. In the space between change and sameness, we find our identity, not as a fixed thing, but as a flow. What does it mean, then, to be the same, to hold on to continuity? It's not about the permanence of a singular form, but the ability to remain in the face of change, to exist, even as the world shifts around us, to be both the river and the water that flows through it. And so we return to the door, to the moon, to the tree. They change and stay the same, and so do we. The paradox is not something to solve, but something to live within. The dance between change and sameness is the rhythm of life itself. Perhaps there is no need to choose one over the other. In the end, the paradox reminds us that identity is not a thing to grasp. It is a thing to experience. We are both the person we were and the person we are becoming. We are the door, the river, the tree, always in motion, yet always the same. We live in the tension between change and continuity, and that perhaps is the essence of who we are. A ship sits in the harbor, its wooden frame weathered by time. Slowly, piece by piece, parts of the ship begin to rot, to wear away. Each broken plank is replaced, one after another, until every single piece has been swapped out. The question arises, is it still the same ship? This is the Ship of Theseus, a paradox that questions the very nature of identity and change. The ship, once whole, now exists only as fragments, each replaced by new parts. Yet the ship remains, the same ship, we are told. But what if nothing about it is original anymore? What is it that holds it together? If every part of the ship has been replaced, can it still be called the Ship of Theseus? The paradox invites us to explore the concept of identity through time. What makes something itself if everything about it can be changed? Is identity tied to the material, to the sum of its parts, or to something deeper? Now imagine a different version of the paradox. All the parts that have been removed from the ship are collected, preserved, and carefully reassembled. A new ship is formed, one made entirely from the original materials. Which ship is the real Ship of Theseus? The one with the old pieces, or the one that has evolved? This same question extends to you. Your body is constantly changing. Cells die, new ones are born. Even the atoms that make you up are replaced over time. You too are like the Ship of Theseus, always shifting, always becoming, but through it all, you remain the same person. Or do you? What is it that connects all these changes, if not something constant within you? Perhaps it is the continuity of experience, the thread of consciousness that carries you from one moment to the next. But even your mind changes, your thoughts evolve, your emotions shift, and the memories you hold become distant as time passes. What remains unchanged in the face of all this transformation? Is it the you that endures, or the story you tell yourself? The Ship of Theseus forces us to confront the fluidity of identity. Can we truly say that the ship, once transformed, is the same? Or do we just label it as such to make sense of the change? And if we apply this thinking to ourselves, do we hold on to the illusion of a constant identity, despite the endless changes we experience? If the ship's parts are replaced, is it still the same ship, or is it an entirely new one, carrying the same name, but with a different essence? The more we examine the ship, the more it becomes clear that identity is not so simple. It is not simply a matter of physical continuity, but something deeper, something more abstract. In a way, the ship's identity exists in the story we tell about it. We say it is the Ship of Theseus, but what does that truly mean? It is not just a collection of parts, it is the meaning we ascribe to those parts, and in that way perhaps identity is more about the narrative we create than the things that change around us. What if the ship, once fully restored, is not the same? The parts are old, but the configuration is new. It's a new arrangement of pieces, a new construction. Perhaps this is how identity works too. We may change, grow, and evolve, but the story of who we are, the narrative we hold on to, remains the same, even as the pieces shift. It is this tension between change and continuity that defines identity. The Ship of Theseus is a paradox, not because it has an answer, but because it forces us to question what it means to remain the same. Identity, like the ship, seems to be something that exists more in our perception than in the physical world around us. We are like the ship, constantly changing, always adapting to the world. Yet, at our core, we feel the pull of continuity, the desire to remain ourselves, to hold on to a sense of who we are. But perhaps, like the ship, we are not one unchanging thing at all. Perhaps identity is a constant process, a continuous transformation. Consider the possibility that identity is not something fixed, but something in flux, a series of moments strung together like the pieces of a ship. We hold on to the idea of sameness, but in truth, nothing about us stays the same. Our bodies change, our minds evolve, and yet we carry forward through it all. The paradox of the Ship of Theseus invites us to reflect on our own lives. What makes us the same person we were yesterday? Is it the continuity of our thoughts, the thread of our memories, the idea we hold of ourselves, even as everything around us shifts? Perhaps the you that exists today is just another version of yourself, another piece of the whole. So when you look at yourself, are you the same person you were a year ago, a decade ago? Or are you something entirely different, constantly rebuilt, constantly transformed? Like the ship, you change, yet remain, you evolve, yet carry with you the memory of what once was. But are you still you? Perhaps in the end, identity is not about what stays the same, but about what we are willing to let go of. The Ship of Theseus shows us that we are not fixed objects, but living, changing beings. And in this constant state of change, we find the essence of who we are, not in the parts we cling to, but in the act of becoming. Identity, like the ship, is both the journey and the destination. It is the parts that change, and the whole that remains. It is the story we tell, even as the chapters shift, even as the pages turn. And in this constant motion, we find a deeper truth that we are not the same, and yet we are always somehow still ourselves. You awaken in a place you do not recognize, surrounded by unfamiliar faces. Yet there is a strange sense of familiarity, a sense that these faces are connected to you in some way. As time passes, the fog begins to lift, and you begin to recognize pieces of your past. But are you the same person you were before? This is the problem of re-identification, the puzzle of who we are when our memories fade, when our circumstances change, when the world around us is different. How do we know we are still the same person when the parts of our identity, the very things that make us who we are no longer the same? In its simplest form, the problem of re-identification asks, what makes you you? Is it your body, your mind, your memories, your relationships? What happens if one of these elements changes or disappears? Can you still be the same person, or have you become someone else entirely? Imagine waking up tomorrow with no memory of who you are. The person you were is lost, and the world you knew is gone, but you are still here. You still walk, talk, breathe. You still exist in the same body, in the same world. But are you still the same person? What then is the essence of you? This problem challenges our very understanding of identity. If we cannot rely on our memories, the threads that bind our past to our present, what holds us together? Without our memories, are we merely strangers to ourselves, drifting through life without a true connection to who we were or who we will become? And yet we continue to feel a sense of continuity. When we look in the mirror, we see the same face, the same eyes that have witnessed so much over the years. We feel the same emotions, make the same decisions, and still, each day we change. But are we the same, or have we become a different person, despite the feeling of familiarity? The problem of re-identification becomes even more complex when we consider how much of our identity is shaped by the outside world. The people around us, the roles we play, the stories we tell, are these parts of who we are, or are they merely masks we wear? If we change the mask, do we change the person underneath? What happens when a significant part of your life is erased, whether through trauma, illness, or simple time? Can you still recognize yourself, still feel the pull of your former self? Or has the change been so profound that the person you were is now lost, replaced by a stranger who carries your name, your face, but not your past? Some argue that the self is not a fixed entity, but a fluid process, a story we tell, a narrative that evolves with time. In this view, re-identification is not a problem at all. We are always in a state of becoming, never fully defined, always reshaping ourselves. But is this fluidity enough to hold on to the essence of who we are? Think of a river, constantly flowing, changing, never the same from one moment to the next, and yet we still call it the same river. What holds the river together, the water that flows through it, or the name we assign to it? And if the river's identity is an illusion, is ours too? This brings us to the idea of continuity. Are we only who we are because we remember who we were? Can we be re-identified through our actions, through the relationships we maintain, through the impact we leave on the world around us? Or does the loss of memory, the change in circumstance, create an entirely new person in our place? Perhaps the answer lies not in what stays the same, but in how we respond to change. The challenge of re-identification is not in finding what remains constant, but in navigating the spaces between change. The person you were may not be the person you are now, but that does not mean you are not still you. Identity may be like a patchwork quilt, stitched together from the fragments of our past, our experiences, and our present. Some patches may fade, some may be replaced, but the quilt remains, a living, breathing work of art. Perhaps re-identification is not a crisis, but a process of continuously weaving new threads into our own story. What then does it mean to be you? Can the loss of a memory, a feeling, a part of your past sever the connection to who you were? Or do you remain, always a reflection of your journey, with every step leaving its mark? The problem of re-identification reminds us that we are both the sum of our past and the creation of our present. In a sense, we are always in the process of re-identification. Every moment shapes us, molds us, even as we continue to carry the weight of what came before. The person you were 5 years ago is not the person you are today, but that does not mean you have ceased to exist. You have simply evolved. This evolution, this shifting of self, is part of the human experience. We are not static beings, fixed in one moment of time. We are creatures of change, constantly adapting, constantly becoming. And in that becoming, we hold on to the essence of who we are, even when the world around us shifts and the past fades. The problem of re-identification ultimately asks us to confront the nature of identity itself. Is it something we carry with us, a constant, unchanging presence? Or is it something we create anew with each passing moment, constantly redefined by the forces of time, memory, and change? Maybe identity is not a question of what stays the same, but how we navigate the changes. We may lose pieces of ourselves, but in the process, we find new ways to connect to who we are. And perhaps, in the end, that is what makes us who we are, our ability to remain, even as we change. Imagine a world where your memories can be rewritten. A world where the moments of your past are no longer fixed, where the memories that shape you can be edited, deleted, or replaced with new ones. What happens to the you who remembers, if the memories themselves are fluid, ever-changing? Memory is the thread that weaves our sense of self. It is the archive of our experiences, the map of our personal journey through time. But what happens when this thread is pulled, when the memories we hold dear are altered or erased? Can we still be the same person, or do we become someone else entirely? In a way, we are our memories. They define who we are, how we view the world, and how the world views us. Every decision we make, every relationship we have, is colored by the memories we carry with us. But if those memories are changed, can we still hold on to the essence of who we are? Think about a key event in your life. The memory is vivid, rich with detail, filled with emotion. Now imagine that memory is altered. Some part of it is shifted, a detail is changed, a moment is lost. The event still happened, but in a new way. Are you still the same person who lived through it? This is the crux of the dilemma. Memory editing, the act of changing or removing memories, disrupts the very foundation of identity. If we lose our past, if we forget who we were, does that change who we are now? Can we really claim to be the same person if the memories that defined us are no longer accurate? It's not just a theoretical exercise. We experience the editing of memories all the time. In subtle ways, the passage of time dulls the edges of our recollections. We forget names, faces, details of events. Our memories become distorted, reshaped by time, by emotion, by the lens through which we view them now. What happens to the you who remembers? In some ways, we are constantly editing our own memories. We rewrite the past in our minds, sometimes to make ourselves feel better, sometimes to fit a narrative we are more comfortable with. But what if we could consciously rewrite them, remove the pain, replace the regret, or add new chapters entirely? Would we still be ourselves? Consider a person who undergoes a deep psychological transformation. Perhaps they forget the traumas of their past, or reframe the way they understand their experiences. If their memories change, does their sense of self change with them? If they become a new person, do they still carry the same identity, or is it lost in the act of editing? Memory is not a perfect recorder of the past. It is fluid, malleable, shaped by our current emotions and beliefs. We often remember things differently from others, our minds altering the details, smoothing over the rough edges, creating a version of the past that feels more comfortable. But this comfort comes at a price. If memory can be so easily altered in small ways, what happens when the changes are deliberate, when the edits are made with intention? Imagine erasing the painful memories, the ones that shaped your personality, your choices, the things you thought were essential to who you are. Are you still you without them, or are you something else entirely? This is the paradox of memory editing. If you erase the past, or if the past is rewritten, does the present remain the same? Can the you of today be the same as the you of yesterday, if your memories of yesterday are no longer intact? And if you change the way you view your past, does that change the way you view your future? When you alter a memory, you alter the narrative of your life. The story you tell about yourself is rewritten, the chapters restructured. This shift is subtle, but profound. You may still recognize the same face in the mirror, but the story that face tells is no longer the same. You've become a new version of yourself. Memory editing challenges the idea of a fixed identity. If we are our memories, if our past is what defines us, then changing the past means changing the person we are. But are we really just the sum of our memories, or is there something deeper, something more permanent that holds us together, even when the past shifts? This concept becomes even more complex when we consider that memory is not just an internal process. Our memories are shaped by others, by the people around us, by society, by the stories we are told. If our memories are influenced by external forces, how can we ever truly say we know who we are? And if we can change those memories, who are we becoming? The more we examine memory, the more we realize that identity is not fixed. It is constantly in flux, shaped by our past, our present, and the way we remember both. Memory editing doesn't just affect our recollections, it affects our very sense of self, the foundation on which we build our lives. But if that foundation is fluid, what are we really building? Perhaps the truth is that identity is never truly stable. Perhaps we are always in the process of becoming, always changing, always reshaping who we are through the lens of memory. If we could edit our memories, would we be able to create a perfect version of ourselves, or would we lose the essence of who we are in the process? In the end, memory editing asks us to question the nature of identity itself. If we are the sum of our memories, can we truly be ourselves without them? And if we can alter those memories, can we still claim to be the same person? Memory is the thread that holds us together, but what happens when that thread is unraveled, piece by piece? Perhaps the most unsettling question is this: if memory editing can change who we are, then what does that say about the constancy of identity? Are we truly the same person from one moment to the next, or are we simply a series of evolving selves, constantly shifting with the flow of time, memory, and perception? You are a storyteller. From the moment you wake, the story of your life begins to unfold. Every thought, every action, every interaction is a line in the narrative that makes you who you are. But what if the story is not as real as you think? What if the self you construct is nothing more than a tale? This is the concept of the narrative self, a view of identity that sees who we are not as a fixed entity, but as a story we tell ourselves. We create this narrative from the fragments of our experiences, our thoughts, and our memories, piecing them together to form a cohesive sense of self. But is it truly us? Every person you meet, every choice you make, every moment that passes is woven into the story of you. You are the protagonist in your own tale, the narrator of your life. But what happens when the story changes? Can the protagonist remain the same? Even as the chapters shift, the plot twists, and the world around you evolves. The narrative self suggests that we are constantly constructing who we are through the stories we tell. But these stories are not objective truths. They are shaped by perception, by memory, by emotion. Our experiences are filtered through the lens of who we believe ourselves to be, and this belief becomes the foundation of our identity. But if the lens changes, does the story change? When you reflect on your past, you are telling a story. You remember key moments, but those moments are not as clear as you might think. Time distorts the details, emotions color the recollections, and as you grow, your understanding of those moments evolves. The past becomes a story, told in the voice of who you are now, not who you were then. This narrative is what makes us feel whole. It gives us continuity. It allows us to feel like we are the same person we were yesterday, even though we have changed. The narrative self provides us with the illusion of permanence, a thread that connects one moment to the next. But when the thread unravels, what happens to the story? Consider how we often define ourselves through roles, who we are in relation to others, to society, to the world. These roles are parts of the story, shaping who we believe ourselves to be. But what happens when we no longer fit those roles? When the narrative changes, can we still be the same person, or do we lose our identity in the process? This is the paradox of the narrative self. We are the stories we tell ourselves, but if the story is not fixed, if it is always changing, can we truly say we are the same person? Every new chapter, every new experience could shift the narrative in ways we never expected. So who are we when the story is rewritten? The narrative self also raises the question of memory. How much of who you are is shaped by what you remember? We often think of our memories as the building blocks of our identity, the pieces of our personal narrative, but memories fade, they shift, and sometimes they lie. When the memory changes, does the self change with it? And what of the future? The narrative self is not just about the past and present, it is also about the future, the story we tell about who we will become. We imagine our lives unfolding in certain ways, shaping our expectations and our decisions. But what happens if the future doesn't unfold the way we imagined? Does the story fall apart, or do we rewrite it once more? The narrative self is both liberating and unsettling. It gives us a sense of control over our lives, over our identity. We can craft the person we want to be, create a future that fits the story we are telling, but it also leaves us vulnerable. What happens when the story falters, when we can no longer make sense of the plot, or when the protagonist loses their way? If identity is a narrative, then who we are is not a constant. We are always in the process of becoming, always adapting to the changes in the story. The person you are today is a different version of the person you were yesterday. And tomorrow the story will evolve again, adding new chapters, new conflicts, new resolutions. But is the narrative self truly you, or is it a construct? Are you the sum of your memories, your experiences, your roles, or are you something deeper, something that exists beyond the story? Perhaps the self is not a fixed character, but an ongoing creation, shaped and reshaped with every passing moment. This view of identity invites us to question everything we think we know about who we are. If our identity is a story, then we are always in the process of writing it. We are never truly finished, never truly fixed. The story is fluid, and so are we. We are both the author and the character, constantly editing the plot as we move through life. The narrative self also highlights the importance of perspective. The way you see yourself, the story you tell, is shaped by your current understanding of the world. As you grow, your view of your past may shift, and the narrative of who you are changes with it. The self is not static, but a reflection of the story we tell, ever-changing and evolving. In a way, the narrative self offers a way to make sense of the chaos of existence. It provides a structure, a framework that allows us to place meaning on the events of our lives, but it is also an illusion. The story is never as fixed as it seems. The protagonist may think they are in control, but the narrative may surprise them, twist and turn in ways they never expected. This fluidity of the self can be both unsettling and freeing. We are not trapped in a fixed identity. We are free to change, to evolve, to become whoever we wish. But in this freedom lies a question: if we are the stories we tell, who are we when the story is no longer clear? When the lines between who we were and who we are blur. And so we return to the idea that we are both the narrator and the story. The narrative self is not an illusion, but a process that allows us to make sense of our experiences, to create meaning from the events of our lives. But just as the story changes, so do we. The self is not fixed, but a continuous unfolding, a journey through the pages of time. In the end, the narrative self is a beautiful paradox. It gives us continuity, but it also reminds us that we are never the same person we were yesterday. We are always evolving, always writing, always becoming, and perhaps that in itself is the essence of who we are, not a fixed identity, but a story in progress, ever changing, ever unfolding. You stand at the edge of a vast river, watching the water flow by. It's always moving, always changing, yet it remains the same river. The river of time flows just as relentlessly, shaping who you are. But what if your identity, too, is a river, ever-changing, yet forever you? This is the question posed by the debate between diachronic and synchronic identity. Diachronic identity concerns who you are over time, the continuity of self across moments, years, and experiences. Synchronic identity, on the other hand, is about who you are at any given moment, frozen in time, isolated from the flow of time. So which is the true you? Think about yourself now. Who are you in this moment? Are you the same person you were yesterday? Or is your identity tied to the accumulation of all the days that came before? The question is simple, yet profound. Are you defined by your past, or by who you are right now? Diachronic identity suggests that we are connected through time, that our essence is not fixed, but is a continual flow. Each moment adds a new layer to the self, shaping the person we become. The person you were as a child is still a part of you, even as you grow, change, and evolve. But synchronic identity offers a different view. It invites us to focus on the present, to see ourselves as we are right now. In this moment, we are a collection of thoughts, feelings, and experiences. But without the context of past or future, can we truly understand who we are? Or is it only in the passage of time that identity gains meaning? In some ways, diachronic identity offers us a sense of continuity. We are not static beings, but ones in flux, evolving through time. We are always becoming, shaped by the experiences and decisions that came before. But does this fluidity threaten the idea of a stable self? If we are always changing, what does it mean to say we are the same person? On the other hand, synchronic identity feels more anchored, more present. In a single moment, we can experience ourselves as a whole, unburdened by the past or the future. We can define ourselves by how we feel in the now, separate from the story that time tells. But without the context of time, can we truly understand our depth? The tension between diachronic and synchronic identity can be seen in the way we approach memory. When we recall the past, we often see a different person. Our experiences shape us, and yet we can feel like strangers to our former selves. Are we the same person who lived through those moments, or are we merely a new version, shaped by time? Yet in the present, we often feel certain of our own identity. We exist in the now, experiencing the world and ourselves as we are, without the weight of the past. But what happens when the present becomes the past? Does the person we are now still exist, or does our identity shift as time weaves its subtle changes? Some might argue that both forms of identity are necessary. Diachronic identity gives us meaning, helping us to understand ourselves through the passage of time. Synchronic identity gives us immediacy, allowing us to experience ourselves as whole, present beings. Perhaps the true essence of who we are lies somewhere between these two views, always in motion, yet always grounded in the present. The problem, however, is that time doesn't always offer us a neat and simple view of identity. Our memories are imperfect, distorted by the passage of time, colored by emotion. What we remember of the past is often more of a story than a factual account. If the past is unreliable, can we rely on it to define us? Diachronic identity relies heavily on continuity. It asks us to believe that the person we were is somehow tied to the person we are. But if the past is fluid and our memories of it are malleable, how can we be sure that we are the same person over time? Perhaps, like the river, we are always the same, but constantly reshaping as we move forward. Synchronic identity, too, has its limitations. It forces us to define ourselves in a single moment, to capture the essence of who we are in the here and now. But is it possible to truly experience ourselves in a single moment, when every part of us, our thoughts, our feelings, our experiences, is constantly in flux? Is there even a self that can be defined? The question becomes more complicated when we consider the role of change. We are not the same person we were 5 years ago, yet we feel connected to that past self. The experiences we've had since then have altered us, but they have not erased us. And so the paradox arises: how can we change and remain the same? Can we truly be defined by both who we were and who we are? Perhaps the answer lies in the way we experience time itself. Time is not linear, not a simple progression from one moment to the next. It is fluid, subjective, shaped by perception. Our identity, then, may not be a fixed point in time, but a continuous flow, influenced by both past and present, shaped by the moments we live and the way we remember them. If we can see identity as a fluid narrative, one that stretches across time and holds us together through its changing form, then perhaps both diachronic and synchronic identity can coexist. We are always changing, but we are also always present, always here. The two perspectives are not opposites, but two sides of the same coin. Ultimately, the tension between diachronic and synchronic identity invites us to question what it means to be ourselves. Are we a collection of past moments, ever evolving through time, or are we the sum of our present experience, a snapshot in the river of life? Perhaps the true nature of identity lies in the dance between these two views, always in motion, yet always here. In the end, perhaps the beauty of our identity lies not in finding one answer, but in embracing the flow. We are both who we were and who we are. Ever changing, ever present, time shapes us, but it does not define us. We are the river and the water, the journey and the destination, always becoming, always being. Imagine standing before a mirror. The reflection staring back at you is not just a likeness but a version of yourself shaped by the way others see you. You have always believed that your identity is something you possess, something internal, but what if it is a reflection of the world around you? This is the essence of the looking glass self, a concept introduced by sociologist Charles Horton Cooley. He proposed that our sense of who we are is shaped not just by our own thoughts and feelings, but by the way others perceive us. Our identity, then, is a mirror, reflecting not just our inner self, but the world's gaze upon us. At first glance, it seems natural to think that we are who we feel ourselves to be. Our thoughts, our experiences, and our feelings define us. But what if our identity is not solely an internal creation? What if, in fact, we are reflections of the people around us, constantly adapting and adjusting to how we are seen? The looking glass self suggests that the mirror of society plays a significant role in shaping our identity. Cooley's theory involves 3 steps. First, we imagine how others perceive us. Second, we imagine how they evaluate us, whether positively or negatively. And third, we develop a self-feeling based on those perceptions, pride, shame, or something else entirely. In this way, our sense of self is a constant process of interpretation and adaptation. We are not just individuals, we are social beings, shaped by the feedback we receive from others. When someone praises us, we feel pride. When someone criticizes us, we may feel shame. Our identity is, in part, the sum of these reactions. The looking glass self forces us to consider that much of who we are is not self-determined at all. How much of your identity is truly yours, and how much of it is constructed from the views others have of you? Is the you present to the world a true reflection of who you are, or just a version tailored to fit society's expectations? This concept complicates the notion of personal identity. If we are constantly adjusting to how others see us, how can we ever truly know who we are? The self is not a fixed entity but a fluid, evolving reflection shaped by the constant gaze of others. What happens when that gaze changes? Consider the way you interact with different people. With close friends, you may feel more at ease, more authentic. But with strangers or authority figures, your behavior may shift, your identity subtly altered to fit the expectations of the situation. Are you the same person in all contexts, or are you a different self with each encounter? It's in this fluidity that the looking glass self reveals its truth, that identity is not something fixed but something dynamic, constantly shifting in response to how we are seen. We adapt ourselves to fit the perceptions others have of us, creating a self that is not entirely our own, but shaped by external forces. The looking glass self also reminds us of the profound impact others have on our sense of self-worth. We seek validation from those around us, and in their approval or disapproval, we find our value. This dependence on external perception can be both empowering and limiting, as our sense of self is tied to something outside our control. As much as we might try to maintain a sense of individuality, we are always influenced by the views of others. Cooley's theory suggests that we are like actors on a stage, constantly aware of the audience's gaze, adjusting our performance to fit their expectations. But in doing so, we may lose touch with who we truly are, yet there is a beauty in this process. The looking glass self does not necessarily mean we are mere puppets of others' opinions. Rather, it suggests that we are social beings, interconnected, shaped by the relationships and interactions that define us. Our identity is not a solitary creation, but a reflection of the bonds we share with others. Consider the role of self-reflection in this process. When we look into the mirror of others, we often see ourselves not just as we are, but as we are perceived. This perception can shape our actions, our desires, and even our dreams. But is the person we see in that reflection the true self, or just a version of who we want to be in their eyes? In this way, the looking glass self challenges the idea of a stable, unchanging identity. Our sense of self is not set in stone but is a mirror, constantly reflecting the world around us. As society changes, so too does our sense of who we are, evolving in response to the shifting tides of perception. Cooley's theory also touches on the idea of self-esteem. When we are viewed positively, we feel good about ourselves. But when we are viewed negatively, our self-worth diminishes. The looking glass self reminds us that our sense of self is deeply tied to the social feedback we receive, shaping how we see ourselves in the world. However, this does not mean we are entirely at the mercy of others' perceptions. Over time, we may develop a more resilient sense of self, one that is less dependent on the approval or disapproval of others. Still, the looking glass self forces us to confront the role others play in the formation of our identity. Perhaps, then, the truth lies somewhere in between. Our identity is not wholly our own, but it is also not entirely defined by others. It is a complex interaction between the reflection we see in the eyes of others and the inner self we create through experience, introspection, and personal growth. The looking glass self teaches us that identity is not a singular fixed thing. It is a dynamic evolving process shaped by both how we see ourselves and how we are seen. Our sense of self is shaped by the world, but it is also something we actively construct. In this way, we are both the product and the creator of our identity. So when you look into the mirror, who do you see? The person you think you are, or the person others see in you? Perhaps, in the end, both reflections are true. Identity is not an illusion, but a process, a continual dance between who we are and how we are seen, both at once, always shifting, always evolving. You walk into a room, and immediately, the roles begin to take shape. You are the friend, the student, the colleague, the family member. Each interaction pulls you into a different part of yourself, a different role to play. But who are you really, when you step outside these roles? This is the essence of role theory in sociology, a concept that suggests our identity is not an inherent fixed quality, but is instead shaped by the roles we perform in society. From the moment we are born, we begin to take on roles that evolve and shift depending on where we are, who we're with, and what is expected of us. We all wear different masks in different situations, don't we? With our parents, we may be a child. With friends, we are a confidant. At work, we become an employee. The roles we occupy are as varied as the people we interact with. But when we change roles, is it still the same you beneath all the masks? Role theory tells us that identity is a fluid, ever-changing construct. We are not born with a set identity. Rather, we develop it through our interactions with others, through the roles we adopt and perform. Every time you step into a new role, you shift, adapt, and become a new version of yourself. But who is the true self? At first glance, this might feel unsettling. If we are just the sum of the roles we play, then what happens when the roles change or disappear? Are we just empty spaces, constantly filling up with the expectations others place on us? Or is there something constant, something deeper that holds us together amidst all the shifting? Role theory suggests that our identity is not a singular entity, but a complex network of social expectations, behaviors, and interactions. You become the roles you inhabit, but these roles are not solely determined by your internal desires or essence. They are shaped by society, by culture, by the expectations of others, and by the context in which you find yourself. Think of how we play the role of parent, friend, teacher, or partner. Each of these roles comes with its own set of expectations, and with each we adapt. We respond to the needs of others, aligning ourselves with the behavior expected in those roles. But when the roles shift, so does the version of ourselves that emerges. In this sense, we are not fixed beings, but social creatures who are constantly performing, constantly adjusting. When you walk into a room, you are not only stepping into a space physically, you are stepping into a role. And with that role, you become a new version of yourself. The question is, which one is the real you? But what happens when the roles we play conflict? Perhaps at work, we must be assertive, while at home we are nurturing. These roles, each with its own set of behaviors and expectations, may seem to pull us in different directions. Are we torn between these roles, or can we reconcile them into one cohesive identity? Role theory also touches on the idea of role strain, the tension we feel when we are unable to fulfill the expectations of the roles we occupy. Imagine trying to balance the demands of work, family, and personal life. The pressure can be overwhelming, and in those moments of strain, who are we? The employee, the parent, the individual. But role strain doesn't just highlight the conflicts between roles, it also speaks to the complexity of our identity. Who we are is not just shaped by one role, but by the interplay of many. The person you are at work is just as important as the person you are at home, and each role is a part of the larger whole. But when they pull in different directions, how do we find balance? This brings us to the idea of role conflict, when two or more roles demand behaviors that are incompatible. You might be expected to be both a leader and a follower, to be both decisive and supportive. In those moments, we are forced to navigate the tension between competing roles, adjusting ourselves to meet the demands of each. But which is the real you in these moments? Perhaps the real self is not found in any one role, but in the way we navigate the spaces between them. The shifting roles we occupy are not contradictions, they are reflections of the complexity of our social existence. We are not one fixed identity, we are many identities, fluid and adaptable, shaped by the roles we are called upon to play. Role theory also invites us to consider the performance of self. In each role we are performing for others, shaping our behavior to fit the expectations of those around us. But who is the actor behind the mask? Are we truly who we seem to be, or are we always just performing, adapting to the gaze of the world around us? In a way, role theory reminds us that identity is a process, not a product. We are not born with a fixed identity, rather we create it, piece by piece, through the roles we take on. Each role is a thread in the fabric of who we are. The more roles we occupy, the more complex the tapestry of our identity becomes. But this process of role-taking is not entirely passive. We don't simply conform to the expectations others place on us. We interpret, we choose how to perform. We bring our own feelings, experiences, and desires to the roles we play. In this way, even though our roles are shaped by society, we are still active participants in the creation of our own identity. At the heart of role theory is the idea that we are defined not by who we are in isolation, but by the relationships we have with others. We are social beings, shaped by the roles we occupy in relation to others. And yet, in the shifting of those roles, we find not instability, but the flexibility to grow, change, and adapt. What does this mean for the self? If we are not just one person but a collection of roles, then perhaps our identity is not something fixed, but something in constant motion. Who we are depends not on the roles we play, but on how we navigate the ever-changing web of social expectations, responsibilities, and relationships. And so, as you step into the next room, as you slip into the next role, ask yourself, who am I in this moment? And how does this role shape who I will become? Perhaps the real beauty of our identity lies not in its permanence, but in its capacity to evolve, to adapt, to grow, ever shaped by the roles we inhabit. You sit in a room, surrounded by the roles you are supposed to play, employee, parent, friend, partner, but none of them feel quite right. You've slipped between these roles so many times that it's hard to remember which one is truly you. You begin to wonder, when all these roles collide, who are you beneath them? This is the essence of role confusion, the feeling of being lost in the myriad expectations of the roles you occupy. Each role requires something different of you, pulling you in different directions. And in the space between, you start to question, is there a true self at all, or are you just the sum of the roles you play? Role confusion often happens when the roles you occupy conflict. Perhaps at work you must be assertive and decisive, while at home you are expected to be gentle and nurturing. The tension between these demands leaves you feeling fragmented, unsure of which part of yourself you should embody in any given moment. Who are you when the roles clash? When these roles become too conflicting, you may experience an identity crisis, a deeper questioning of who you are, what you stand for, and where you fit in the world. You begin to wonder if the self you've been presenting to the world is truly your own, or just a collection of adaptations to meet others' expectations. An identity crisis can arise when the roles you play no longer feel authentic. Maybe you've been playing the same role for so long that you've lost sight of your true desires, your true self. When you look in the mirror, you no longer recognize the person staring back at you. Are you still the same person? Or have you become a stranger to yourself? This feeling of being lost, adrift between roles, can be disorienting. Role confusion isn't just about external expectations, it's also about your internal sense of self. You may feel like you are constantly shifting, trying to meet the needs of others, and in doing so, losing touch with your own needs, desires, and beliefs. Where do you fit into the equation? Sometimes the roles you are expected to play are so deeply ingrained that you can't separate who you are from the expectations that come with them. The role of a parent, a spouse, a friend, each of these carries certain assumptions about who you should be. But when you try to live up to them, you start to wonder, is this really me, or am I just performing for the world? An identity crisis can be triggered by the loss of a role. When a role is taken away, perhaps through a change in circumstances, a loss, or a shift in relationships, you may feel like you've lost a part of yourself. Without that role, who are you? If your identity was tied to being a parent, a partner, or an employee, what happens when that identity is no longer relevant? In the midst of role confusion, it's easy to feel like you are drifting, unable to find your footing. You may try to cling to the roles that have shaped you, but they no longer feel comfortable. The boundaries between who you are and who you are supposed to be blur, leaving you feeling fractured, disconnected, and unsure of your place in the world. The problem of role confusion is that it obscures the true self beneath the layers of performance. If you are always adapting to fit the roles others expect you to play, how can you know who you are outside of those roles? Your true self becomes hidden, buried beneath the expectations and pressures of the roles you occupy. In times of role confusion, the search for authenticity becomes urgent. You begin to ask yourself, who am I when I am not trying to be all things to everyone? What parts of myself have I neglected or forgotten in the process of living up to the roles I've been assigned? How can I reconnect with the essence of who I am? This search for authenticity is at the heart of an identity crisis. You feel like you are trapped in a cycle of roles, each one demanding something different, and yet none of them feel completely true to you. It's as if you are playing a part in someone else's story, and you can no longer remember your own. When roles become too rigid, when they no longer align with your inner sense of self, the dissonance becomes unbearable. You try to wear these masks to fit the expectations placed upon you, but each mask feels uncomfortable, like an ill-fitting suit. In this space, the question arises, who are you really beyond the roles, the expectations, the performances? An identity crisis is a call to reconnect with your true self. It's a moment of reckoning, a time to let go of the roles that no longer serve you, to shed the masks you've worn to please others. In this space, you may rediscover who you are beneath the layers of performance, finding strength in your authenticity. But the journey to self-discovery is not always easy. It requires a willingness to step away from the roles that have defined you and face the uncertainty of not knowing exactly who you are. It's a process of letting go of old identities and embracing the unknown, allowing yourself to grow and evolve beyond the constraints of predefined roles. The beauty of overcoming role confusion lies in the freedom that comes from embracing your true self. When you stop trying to fit into the roles others have created for you, you give yourself permission to explore, to experiment, and to create a new identity that reflects your truest essence. You become the author of your own story, free from the expectations of others. As you shed the layers of role confusion and embrace your authentic self, you begin to see that identity is not something fixed, but something fluid. It is not defined by the roles you play, but by the way you navigate the spaces between them. You are not a collection of performances, but a person in constant growth, always becoming. And so, in the quiet of the night, as you reflect on the roles that have shaped you, ask yourself, who am I beyond the masks? Who am I when I am not trying to be everything to everyone? The answer may come softly, in the stillness of your own heart, as you reconnect with the truth of who you are beneath it all. You stand before the world, knowing you are seen in a certain way. You know the roles you are expected to play, the behaviors you must exhibit, the way you are supposed to act. But what if all of this is not just a reflection of who you are, but a performance, a series of acts? This is the essence of gender performativity, a concept introduced by philosopher Judith Butler. According to Butler, gender is not something you are, but something you do, a series of repeated actions, gestures, and behaviors that align with societal expectations. It's not an inherent truth, but an ongoing performance shaped by culture and context. From the moment you are born, the world begins to assign roles to you. These roles are based on your biological sex, but they carry with them a weight of expectation. You are taught how to behave, how to speak, how to move, based on the gender that society has assigned to you. But what if these expectations are just that, expectations, not truths? Gender performativity suggests that we are not born with a set gender identity. Rather, gender is something we enact over and over throughout our lives. It is through our performances, our actions, that we come to be seen as a man or a woman, or something else entirely. But in doing so, do we lose sight of who we truly are? These performances, repeated daily, become so ingrained that they feel natural. You dress a certain way, speak a certain way, interact a certain way, all because you have been taught what is expected of you. And yet, if you step back, you realize that all of this is just a set of actions, repeated until they become almost automatic. But is this really who you are? Butler's theory challenges the idea that gender is something intrinsic, something fixed within us. Instead, gender is a fluid, dynamic process, a performance that we are constantly engaged in, a script that we are always reading and rereading. The more we perform these roles, the more they seem like truth, but in reality, they are just acts. In a way, the concept of gender performativity invites us to question everything we know about identity. If gender is not something inherent, but something we perform, then where does our true self reside? Are we merely the sum of our performances, or is there something deeper that defines us, something beyond the roles we play? Think of the roles you've played in your own life. How many of them are shaped by expectations, by the world's vision of what it means to be a man or a woman? The way you dress, the way you speak, the way you move, each of these actions is a part of the performance, but are they truly you, or just a reflection of the world's gaze? And yet these performances are not without power. Society holds these gender expectations tightly, shaping our lives, shaping our identities. The more we perform, the more we are seen as conforming to these norms. The performance becomes a way of gaining acceptance, of being recognized, of being seen. But in that recognition, do we lose our sense of authenticity? Gender performativity doesn't just apply to individuals, it applies to society at large. We collectively participate in these performances, reinforcing gender norms and expectations with every act. From the smallest gesture to the most profound social roles, we all participate in shaping and reshaping what it means to be a man, a woman, or anything in between. Butler's theory asks us to reconsider the very foundation of gender. If gender is performative, then it is not something fixed, not something we are born with. It is something that is created, constructed, and reinforced through repetition. And in that repetition, we come to believe that it is real, that it is natural, but in truth, it is a social construct. So, where does that leave us? If gender is a performance, then who are we outside of the roles we play? Are we still ourselves when we step out of these expectations, or have we become so entangled in the act that we no longer recognize the person beneath the performance? Who are we when the script is set aside? The power of gender performativity lies in its ability to reveal the fluidity of identity. We are not bound by rigid roles, rather, we are free to experiment, to create, to redefine what it means to be a man, a woman, or anything else. The more we break free from the constraints of performance, the more we can see who we are beyond the roles. But even as we push against these boundaries, the act of performing can still hold power over us. The world continues to gaze upon us, continues to ask us to fit into roles, to play our parts. And so, we must navigate the tension between the performances we enact and the truth we feel inside. Can we ever be truly free from these expectations? Perhaps the answer lies not in rejecting the performance, but in understanding it as just that, a performance. If gender is a set of acts, then it is a script we can choose to rewrite. We are not bound by the roles we are given. We can adapt, shift, and create new possibilities for ourselves. The performance becomes a space of freedom rather than limitation. And in this understanding, we can find a deeper truth. Gender may be performative, but it is also a space of creative potential. By recognizing the roles we play, we can choose how to embody them, how to shape them, how to push against them. Identity becomes not a fixed thing, but a fluid, dynamic process, one that we can mold with each act. The concept of gender performativity forces us to confront the ways in which our identities are shaped by forces outside ourselves. But it also offers us the power to reshape those identities, to perform new roles, to create new possibilities. Identity is not something we are given, but something we continually create, act by act, performance by performance. In the end, gender performativity is not a limit, but an invitation. It invites us to see that our identities are not fixed, but are shaped through the actions we take. We are not bound by societal expectations. We are free to craft ourselves anew. The performance is ours to define, to change, to create, and in that freedom, we discover who we truly are. You open your phone, scroll through an endless stream of images, posts, and messages. Each moment, you craft a version of yourself, a digital reflection. But this version of you is not the same as the one you see in the mirror. It is shaped by the choices you make, the narratives you create online. But which one is real? In the digital world, identity becomes a fluid concept, constantly shifting and evolving. The person you are in the real world is not the same as the person you present online. You edit, curate, and shape your digital self, playing with the boundaries between who you are and who you wish to be seen as. But where does the true self lie in all of this? Digital identity is not singular, but multiple. With every new platform, every new interaction, you take on a different version of yourself. On social media, you might be the fun, outgoing individual. On a professional network, you are the ambitious and hard-working employee. Each of these versions of you is real, but which one is the true you? This multiplicity of digital identities raises an unsettling question. If we are constantly shifting and adapting our online personas, who are we really? Are we defined by the version of ourselves we choose to project to the world, or by something deeper, something untouched by the digital constructs we create? In many ways, digital identity allows us to explore different facets of ourselves, to be more than one version of who we are. We can experiment, play with different roles, try on new selves, but this freedom comes at a cost. The more we navigate these digital spaces, the more we lose sight of the person beneath the many versions of ourselves. The digital world is a space of infinite possibilities, but it can also be a place of fragmentation. We craft ourselves in different ways, depending on the platform, the audience, and the context. But with every new version of ourselves, we risk losing the sense of continuity that connects us to the real, embodied self. Who are we when we step away from the screen? This multiplicity is not limited to online spaces. In the digital age, our sense of self is increasingly shaped by the choices we make in the virtual world. Our actions online, whether they are posts, likes, or comments, reflect who we are, but they are also shaped by the world around us. We are always performing, always curating, but who is the true performer? The complexity of digital identity is that it is not static. It is always in flux, always shifting to meet the expectations of the digital world. The more we interact with these spaces, the more we become enmeshed in the performance. But in the act of performing, do we lose ourselves in the narrative we create? Or do we find a new sense of self in the process? Think about the version of yourself you present online. Is it the same person you are when no one is watching, when the screen is turned off? What happens when the digital world fades into the background? Do the identities you create there remain, or do they dissolve, leaving only the self that exists beyond the screen? Digital identity also invites us to question the authenticity of who we are. In the digital world, we can shape our image, curate our experiences, and filter our reality. But can we ever be sure that the version of ourselves we present online is the real one? Or is it just a carefully crafted illusion, a performance designed for the gaze of others? In some ways, the digital world offers a freedom that the physical world cannot. We can recreate ourselves, build a new version of our identity, experiment with different ways of being. But this freedom also comes with a sense of disconnection. The more we fragment ourselves online, the more we lose the sense of being whole, of being truly unified. This tension between multiplicity and unity is at the heart of digital identity. We are free to explore different aspects of ourselves, to perform different versions of who we are. But as we do, we risk losing touch with the person who exists beyond the screen. Who are we when we are no longer performing, when we step away from the digital world? Perhaps the answer lies in understanding that identity is not fixed. It is fluid, ever-changing, and shaped by the contexts we find ourselves in. The versions of ourselves we create online are no less real than the person we are in the physical world. But the question remains, how do we reconcile these multiple identities with the sense of self we hold within? The digital age forces us to confront the idea that identity is not singular, but multiple. We are not just one version of ourselves, but many, constantly shifting to meet the demands of the world around us. The challenge then is to navigate this multiplicity without losing the sense of continuity that ties us all together. In the end, digital identity is both liberating and unsettling. It gives us the freedom to explore who we are, to reinvent ourselves in countless ways. But it also leaves us questioning, if we are all these different versions of ourselves, who are we really? And when the screen is turned off, when the performance ends, who are we then? Perhaps then, the true self is not something fixed, not something easily defined. It is a process, a constant evolution, shaped by the roles we play, the choices we make, and the world we inhabit. Identity is not one thing, but a tapestry, woven from countless threads, each version of ourselves a piece of the whole. And in the quiet moments, when the digital world fades away, and we are left with just ourselves, we may find that our true identity is not something that can be captured by a single image, a single performance. It is a multiplicity, a dance of moments and experiences, each adding depth and richness to the person we are becoming. You sit at the edge of a glowing screen, watching a world unfold before you, a world that is not real, yet feels as if it is. You create an avatar, a digital representation of yourself, and begin to move through this virtual space. But who is this avatar? Is it you? Or is it something else entirely? In virtual worlds, identity becomes something malleable, something you can shape and mold with each click, each choice, each action. You craft an artificial self, one that looks how you want it to look, acts how you want it to act. But what happens when the version of you in the virtual world becomes as real as the version you see in the mirror? This is the paradox of artificial selves in virtual worlds. The digital you is a creation, a construct built from choices, not from biology or history. Yet, as you interact with others in this space, the avatar begins to take on a life of its own. It becomes an extension of you, a version of yourself that you control, but that also controls you. In many ways, the artificial self is liberating. You can be anyone, anything in this space. You can transcend the limitations of your physical body, step into roles and identities that might be impossible in the real world. But as you lose yourself in this new self, the question arises, who are you really when the performance ends? Your avatar, your artificial self, is not bound by the same constraints as your physical body. You can be more confident, more beautiful, more daring. You can explore parts of your personality that feel repressed or hidden in the physical world. In this space, you are free to become the person you've always dreamed of being. But this freedom also raises unsettling questions. If you can be anyone, if you can mold your identity so easily, does that mean the version of yourself you inhabit in the real world is less true, less authentic? When the virtual self becomes more real than the self you know in the flesh, which one is the true you? In virtual worlds, the boundary between the real self and the artificial self begins to blur. You might start to believe that your avatar is just as much a part of you as the body you walk around in every day. The choices you make, the relationships you form, the experiences you have, all of these contribute to the sense that the digital self is a reflection of who you are. But is the digital self really a reflection, or is it something completely separate from who you are? When you create an avatar, you are crafting an identity that is shaped by external forces, by the design of the platform, by the limitations of the digital world itself. And in doing so, you begin to question whether the real you is anything more than a reflection of your environment. The artificial self is a construct, but so too is the real self. The identity you carry with you in the physical world is shaped by the environment you inhabit, by the roles you play, by the people you encounter. The difference is that in the digital world, you can actively control and manipulate these forces, shaping a self that might be truer to your desires than the one you present in reality. In virtual spaces, your identity becomes fluid. You can change your appearance, your behavior, your role at will. One moment, you might be a warrior, charging into battle. The next, a healer, tending to those in need. The digital self is a chameleon, able to shift with each new interaction, each new experience. But how does this constant shifting affect your sense of who you are? This fluidity creates a sense of multiplicity. You are not just one version of yourself, but many, each version existing in parallel in the digital world. You can be whoever you want to be, and yet you are still bound by the same need for recognition, for validation, that drives the physical self. The question becomes, when you are all these versions of yourself, who are you underneath it all? The line between the real self and the artificial self begins to blur, and with it, the nature of identity itself. If your digital self is an extension of you, then how do you reconcile the parts of yourself that exist only in the virtual world? Are these parts of you truly real, or are they just an illusion, a performance played out on a digital stage? In many ways, the digital world invites us to explore the fluidity of identity. We can reinvent ourselves, try on new selves, experiment with different roles and behaviors, but in doing so, we risk losing sight of the fact that identity is not something static. It is a process, a performance, a constant evolution shaped by our interactions with the world around us. And yet, in the digital world, the performances we put on feel real. The relationships we form, the identities we create, seem to carry the same weight as those we experience in the physical world. In this space, we are recognized, we are seen, we are valued, and that recognition gives the artificial self a sense of authenticity. But this authenticity is always in question. How much of the self that you create in a virtual world is truly you? Can you separate the artificial self from the real self, or are they intertwined, both feeding off each other, both shaping the person you are becoming? The artificial self is a mirror, but it is also a new creation, a self that is both you and not you at the same time. The danger of the artificial self lies in its potential to overshadow the real self. If you spend too much time inhabiting a version of yourself that is shaped by external forces, by the digital world, you may begin to lose touch with the person you are when the screen goes dark. The artificial self may become so real that you forget it is just a performance, an illusion crafted for a world that exists only in pixels. But perhaps the true self is not bound to any one version of identity. The digital self is not an escape from reality, but a reflection of the many selves we inhabit in different spaces. In this way, the artificial self is no less real than the self we present in the physical world. It is simply another version, another layer, in the endless evolution of who we are. In the end, the artificial self in virtual worlds challenges us to rethink the very nature of identity. If we are all just performances, just roles we play in different contexts, then what does it mean to be real? Perhaps identity is not something we find, but something we create, constantly shifting, always in motion, always a reflection of the worlds we inhabit. You watch a cat curled up in the sun, its eyes closed in peaceful slumber. It shifts in its sleep, stretching, curling once more. But in this simple act, does the cat recognize itself? Does it know it is the cat it has always been? The question of self-identity in non-human animals is one that invites deep contemplation. For humans, self-identity is shaped by reflection, by consciousness, by the ability to recognize oneself in a mirror. We know who we are because we think about who we are. But what about animals? Do they have a sense of self, or is their existence purely instinctual, driven by immediate needs and desires without any awareness of their own being? Some animals, like humans, are capable of recognizing themselves in mirrors. This ability, known as self-recognition, suggests that at least in some species, there may be a rudimentary sense of self. But what does this really mean? If a monkey gazes at its reflection, does it see itself as an individual, or is it simply reacting to an unfamiliar image? Self-recognition in animals, however, is not universal. Most species do not show this ability. They might interact with their reflection, but they do not appear to recognize it as themselves. For these animals, it seems that identity is not something they ponder. They live in the moment, responding to their environment, driven by their instincts rather than a complex sense of self. This raises a profound question. If some animals can recognize themselves and others cannot, what does that tell us about the nature of self-identity? Is it something that arises naturally with higher cognitive abilities, or is it a concept unique to humans, tied to our capacity for abstract thought and self-reflection? The question of self-identity in animals challenges our understanding of consciousness. For humans, self-awareness is closely tied to identity, the knowledge of who we are and how we fit into the world. But for animals, the concept of self may be entirely different. They may experience the world not as individuals, but as part of a greater whole, connected to their environment in a way that is unfamiliar to us. In some species, like dolphins, elephants, and certain birds, there is evidence that they may possess a higher level of social intelligence. These animals form intricate social bonds and exhibit behaviors that suggest an understanding of their own role in the group. But is this a form of self-identity, or is it simply the ability to navigate complex social dynamics? For animals that do not recognize themselves in mirrors, their sense of self might be defined by a different kind of awareness, one that is more attuned to their immediate needs and surroundings. They may not have the capacity to look inward, to reflect on their place in the world, but they are aware of the world around them and their position within it. This form of self-awareness might be simpler, more immediate, and less reflective. It is not the self-awareness that humans possess, which allows us to question, to ponder, and to define ourselves through thought. Instead, it is a practical awareness, one that is based on the here and now, on the interactions and relationships that help the animal survive and thrive. In many ways, the non-human animal's experience of self-identity is tied to the body, to the physical sensations that arise from living in a world of constant change and interaction. Their identity is not something they reflect upon, but something they experience through movement, touch, and instinct. They are present in the world, but not necessarily contemplating their place in it. Consider the way a bird builds its nest, or how a lion marks its territory. These behaviors are not motivated by an abstract sense of self, but by the instinctual knowledge of what is necessary to survive and thrive. The animal does not ponder who it is, it simply acts according to the natural rhythms of its existence. Perhaps the true difference between humans and non-human animals lies not in the presence of self-identity, but in the way we process it. While animals may act with an inherent sense of self within their environment, humans are capable of stepping back, of reflecting on, and of defining it through thought, language, and culture. This ability to reflect and define ourselves is what sets humans apart. Our consciousness allows us to look inward, to analyze our experiences, and to ask questions about who we are. Non-human animals, in contrast, experience their world through a more immediate, instinctual connection to their bodies and surroundings, without the need for abstract self-reflection. Yet, this does not mean that animals lack a sense of being. They may not reflect on their identity as we do, but they are fully present in the moment, aware of their needs and desires, and able to navigate the world with remarkable intelligence and adaptability. Their sense of self is not abstract, but deeply rooted in the here and now. In some ways, the simplicity of the animal's sense of self can offer us a profound lesson. While humans are often caught up in the complexity of self-reflection, of defining and redefining who we are, animals live in the moment, existing fully in the present, without the need for constant introspection. Their identity is not a question. It is an experience. This difference between human and non-human animals' sense of self challenges us to rethink our own identity. We look inward, searching for meaning and definition, while animals live outward, engaging fully with the world around them. Perhaps in this way, they are closer to the essence of self than we realize, existing as pure being, without the need for definition. And so, when you look at the animals around you, remember that their sense of self is not something to be questioned or pondered, it is simply experienced. They are not burdened with the complexities of identity, they simply are. Perhaps in their simplicity, there is a lesson for us about being, without the need to define. You close your eyes for a moment and turn inward. There is a feeling of being here, of existing in this body, of being aware of yourself, but what does it really mean to be? This is the heart of the phenomenology of the first person, the experience of the self, not as an object, but as a subject, as the one who perceives. In phenomenology, the first-person experience is central. It is the lived reality of being yourself, the awareness you have of being you in this moment. But how do we grasp this experience? How can we understand the self, not from the outside, but from the inside, from the very consciousness that is experiencing it all? The phenomenology of the first person invites us to think about identity, not as a concept or label, but as a direct experience. We are aware of the world, aware of our bodies, aware of our thoughts and feelings. But the question remains, who is the one who is aware? Who is the subject of this experience, if not the self? In everyday life, we move through the world with a sense of continuity. We wake up, we act, we interact, and through it all, we feel like the same person, moment to moment. But what if this continuity is an illusion? What if the very essence of who we are is not a fixed identity, but a constant flow of experience? The phenomenology of the first person asks us to go deeper. It challenges us to explore the subjective nature of our experience, the way we live inside our minds, the way we feel our own existence. It is not enough to think about identity as something external. We must look inward into the experience of being and question what it means to be at all. At the core of this exploration is a sense of self-awareness. You know that you exist, and this knowledge is immediate, felt directly in your experience. But where does this self-awareness come from? How is it that we can be conscious of ourselves, and how does this awareness shape our understanding of who we are? The first-person perspective is not something we can observe from the outside. It is not a thing to be measured or quantified. It is the essence of experience itself, the internal landscape through which we navigate the world. And yet it feels so real, so immediate, that it is easy to forget that it is just that experience. But as we reflect on this experience, we begin to see the complexity of self-awareness. How can we as subjective beings fully understand the nature of our own existence? We live inside our minds, but we cannot step outside them. The experience of being you is, by definition, a mystery, a process that cannot be fully grasped. This tension between subjectivity and objectivity lies at the heart of the phenomenology of the first person. We know ourselves through our experiences, but these experiences are filtered through our own consciousness. We perceive the world not as it is, but as we experience it, shaped by our thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. In this way, the self becomes both a part of the world and separate from it. In this way, identity is not something fixed or objective. It is an ongoing process, a flow of experiences that continuously shape who we are. Each moment, each thought, each feeling adds a new layer to the self. But in this fluidity, does the real you ever stay the same? Or are you always becoming, always shifting, always in motion? The phenomenology of the first person forces us to confront the paradox of identity. We are the subjects of our experience, but we cannot separate ourselves from the experience itself. We exist in the world, but we also create the world we experience. Our identity is shaped by how we see ourselves, but it is also shaped by how we see the world. Consider the experience of looking at the world through your own eyes. Everything you see is filtered through your consciousness, shaped by your thoughts, your emotions, and your past experiences. In this way, you are not merely observing the world, you are actively participating in the creation of your reality. The I is not separate from the world, it is inseparable from it. This fluidity between subject and object is what makes the phenomenology of the first person so fascinating. It suggests that identity is not something you can hold, something you can define with certainty. It is not a fixed essence, but a continuous flow of experience, shaped by the lens through which we see the world and ourselves. But what happens when we step outside of this flow, when we begin to reflect on the experience itself? Can we ever truly grasp the nature of the self, or is it something beyond our reach, something that can only be lived, but never fully understood? In the act of reflection, do we create a separation between the subject and the object of experience? The phenomenology of the first person invites us to explore this question, to recognize that the self is not an object to be observed, but a process to be experienced. It is not something that can be pinned down, not something that can be captured in a neat definition. The self is a living, breathing reality, always in motion, always evolving. Perhaps this is the key to understanding identity as an illusion, not in the sense that we do not exist, but in the sense that our sense of self is always shifting, always changing. The I that you are in this moment may not be the same I that you were in the past, nor the same I you will be in the future. In the end, the phenomenology of the first person reveals that identity is not a static thing. It is not something we can fully capture or define. It is a continuous process, a living experience that flows and changes with every breath. And in this fluidity, we find the essence of who we are, not a fixed self, but a self that is always becoming. You stand in front of a mirror, seeing the reflection of a face you recognize as your own. But the more you stare, the more the reflection seems distant, uncertain. The question arises, who is this person looking back at you, and how do you know that it is truly you? This is the question of indexicality and identity. Indexicality refers to the way in which our identity is tied to the context in which we exist, to the moment in time and space where we are located. Just as a word like here or now depends on the context to have meaning, our sense of self depends on the circumstances around us to make sense. The concept of indexicality suggests that our identity is not fixed, not something we can define once and for all. Instead, it is shaped by the situations, the environments, and the relationships we find ourselves in. Who you are is always linked to the context in which you exist, and without that context, identity becomes an abstraction. When we say I am here, the I is not a fixed entity. It is a person defined by location, by presence. But if we move, if we step into a different situation, the I shifts. The self is not something constant, but something that changes depending on the context, the environment, the relationships we engage with. In this way, identity becomes dynamic, fluid, and unstable. It is not something we possess in isolation, but something that emerges in relation to the world around us. Every time we interact with others, every time we enter a new space, our identity shifts, shaped by the expectations and the interactions that define that moment. Consider how you behave in different settings. The way you interact with friends may be different from the way you speak at work, or the way you are with your family. In each case, you are the same person, yet the you that is seen by others is shaped by the context you are in. This is the essence of indexicality. In fact, the I you perceive as yourself is also an index, an expression of the current context in which you exist. You are not the same I in every moment. Your identity is not an essence that you carry with you. It is constantly being created, shaped and altered by the environment, the people, and the circumstances around you. When you look at yourself, you see a reflection of the person you think you are. But in truth, the person you see in the mirror is also an index, an image shaped by the past, by the present, and by the way you are perceived. Your identity is not fixed within you, but emerges from the interaction between your inner world and the world around you. This is the paradox of indexicality and identity. The self is not something you can define, but something that is constantly unfolding, constantly shaped by context. Each time you encounter the world, you encounter a new version of yourself, shaped by the moment, the place, and the people around you. In this way, identity becomes a process, an ongoing creation, rather than a static thing. You are not a finished product, but a fluid and evolving presence. The I is not an unchanging core, but a shifting entity, always emerging in the flow of time, always adapting to the situation at hand. Even when you reflect on your past, you are not the same person you once were. The you that you were yesterday is shaped by a different context, a different set of circumstances. You are not defined by your past, but by the present moment and how it shapes the person you are becoming. The I is always in the process of becoming. But this dynamic nature of identity does not make it any less real. In fact, it suggests that identity is more authentic because it is not rigid but responsive. You are always adapting, always shifting, and in that fluidity, you find a deeper connection to yourself, one that is not defined by the past or the future, but by the present moment. Indexicality also invites us to recognize that we are always in relation to others. The I is not a solitary, isolated being, but a presence that exists within a web of relationships. Our identity is shaped not just by how we see ourselves, but by how others see us, by the roles we play, by the expectations we meet. In this way, the I is always relational. You are not just you in isolation, you are you in context, shaped by the interactions and relationships that define your existence. Without these relationships, without the context in which you exist, identity becomes empty, a concept without substance, without meaning. The phenomenon of indexicality reminds us that identity is not something we can control or define in isolation. It is always emerging, always shifting, always being influenced by the world around us. And in this constant evolution, we find the essence of who we are, not as something fixed, but as something alive, something that moves with the flow of life. In the end, indexicality teaches us that identity is not a thing to be found, but a process to be experienced. We are always becoming, always adapting, always responding to the world and the people around us. The I is not a static thing, but a living presence, always shaped by the context in which we exist. So when you look at yourself, remember that you are not just a fixed entity, You are an unfolding process shaped by the world, by your experiences, by the interactions that define your life. Your identity is not something to be grasped, but something to be experienced, lived, and embraced in the flow of time. You sit quietly, alone with your thoughts, and wonder what makes you asterisk you asterisk. What is the essence of your identity, the thing that connects all the fragments of your experience? In the quiet, the answer might surprise you. Perhaps the self is not as grand or complex as we often think. Perhaps it is simpler than we realize. This is the idea of the minimal self, a concept that suggests our sense of identity does not need to be a vast, complicated thing. Instead, it is something simpler, something fundamental, a core experience of being, of existing, that underpins all the roles, thoughts, and experiences we accumulate throughout our lives. The minimal self is not the self we construct through stories, through memories, or through the performances we put on for the world. It is not defined by what we do or by the labels we wear. It is a bare awareness, a simple feeling of being that persists even when all else fades away. At the heart of the minimal self is the experience of deemed sense that you are here, existing, in this moment. When you let go of everything else, the roles, the judgments, the narratives, you are left with this simple awareness. This, perhaps, is the essence of who you are. A quiet, still sense of existence without the need for definition. Imagine for a moment that everything you know about yourself, the past, the future, the identity you've carefully constructed, vanishes. What remains? What would it feel like to exist without all the labels and expectations? In that moment, you might find a profound stillness, a pure experience of being that is not tied to any particular identity. This is the power of the minimal self. It strips away the layers, the complexities, and reveals the core of who you are, a presence, a being, without the need to define yourself. It suggests that the essence of your identity may not lie in what you do or who you are to others, but in the simple act of existing in the world. The minimal self invites us to consider that we may not need to constantly define ourselves, to constantly build and rebuild who we are. Perhaps the self is not a project, something we work on over time, but a moment, a quiet awareness that is always there, underneath everything else, simply waiting to be recognized. In some ways, the minimal self is the most basic form of self-awareness. It is not about thinking or reflecting on who we are, but about the direct experience of existing. It is the awareness that you are alive, that you are present in this moment, even when everything else falls away. It is the purest form of selfhood. When we strip away all the complexities of our lives, we are left with this simple, unadorned sense of being. The minimal self is not concerned with achievements, with roles, with the stories we tell about our lives. It is simply the experience of being here right now, in the world. It is enough in its simplicity. In this sense, the minimal self is timeless. It exists before and after all the complexities of identity come into play. It is the self that remains when the narratives fade, the one that holds your experience of life in a way that is not defined by anything external. It is the essence that never changes, even as everything else shifts. Consider how often you define yourself by the roles you play, the parent, the partner, the worker. These roles are important, yes, but they are also temporary. The minimal self, however, is not dependent on what you do or how you relate to others. It exists independently of these roles, as the simple awareness of being, and yet the minimal self is not an escape from the world. It is not a retreat into isolation or emptiness. It is a way of being more deeply connected to the world, without the need for all the labels and expectations. It is the experience of being fully present in each moment, without needing to prove anything, without needing to be anything. In many ways, the minimal self is what remains when we let go of our need for control, when we stop trying to define ourselves according to external standards. It is a liberation from the complexity of identity, an invitation to experience life as it is, without the pressure to constantly shape and reshape who we are. This experience is often fleeting, hard to hold on to. We are so conditioned to think about ourselves in terms of stories, of roles, of achievements, but in those moments when the noise fades and the mind is still, we touch the minimal self. We remember what it is like to simply exist without the weight of self-definition. Perhaps this is the most profound aspect of the minimal self. It reminds us that we do not need to be anything more than what we already are. We are enough, just as we are, in this moment, in this breath. The minimal self does not require us to be anything else to achieve anything else. It is complete in its simplicity. The minimal self is also deeply connected to the present moment. It is not concerned with the past or the future. It is the awareness of being here, now in this body, in this life. When we are present, when we let go of the need to define ourselves, we are able to experience life more fully, more deeply, in its purest form. In the end, the minimal self asks us to release the need for complexity, to embrace the simplicity of just being. It shows us that identity does not have to be an elaborate construction, but can be found in the quiet moments of awareness. The essence of who we are is already here, always present, waiting to be felt. You drift through time, and with each passing moment you feel yourself changing. Not in grand dramatic ways, but in subtle shifts. Your thoughts evolve, your feelings adjust, your perspectives deepen. And in this constant ebb and flow you begin to wonder, who is the real you, the one beneath all these changes? This is the essence of the protean self, a concept that suggests our identity is not fixed or stable, but fluid, shifting like a river's course. The self you know today may not be the same as the one you will know tomorrow. Identity is not a constant, it is a transformation ever in motion. The protean self is like water, constantly adapting to the shape of its surroundings. It is not defined by any one moment, any one identity, but by a series of ongoing transformations. As you move through life, you change, not just on the surface but in the core of who you are, in the way you understand yourself. Each new experience, each new interaction leaves its mark on you. The thoughts you have today might feel different from those you had yesterday. The person you were 5 years ago may feel distant, unfamiliar, and yet they are still a part of you. The protean self is a mosaic of moments, an ever-changing tapestry of identity. Unlike the static view of the self, the protean self is not confined to a single definition. It embraces change as part of the process of living. Every experience you have reshapes you, refines you, molds you into something new, yet something that still carries echoes of who you once were. The self is always becoming. Consider the roles you play in life. With each new role you are a new version of yourself, different in subtle ways, yet still connected to the person you were before. A child becomes an adult, a friend becomes a partner, a worker becomes a retiree. Each shift is an evolution, a change that adds depth, not a destruction of the past. In the protean self, identity is not a solid entity, but a series of interwoven threads, each representing a different aspect of your existence. Your identity grows and adapts, just as a tree grows and changes shape with the seasons. You are never the same, yet you remain the same, because you are always growing. The protean self is not bound by the need for consistency. It does not cling to rigid definitions, but flows with the changing currents of life. You are not limited by the version of yourself you were yesterday, nor are you confined to a single future. The protean self embraces the fluidity of existence, allowing you to become many things at once, but this fluidity can feel unsettling. In a world that values consistency, that asks you to define who you are, the protean self might seem like an illusion, a contradiction. How can you be both many things and one thing? How can you change so much and still be you? Perhaps the answer lies in the understanding that identity is not about permanence. What if the true essence of self lies not in fixed traits, but in the capacity to evolve? If you are always changing, always adapting, always becoming, then perhaps your identity is not defined by who you are at any single moment, but by the totality of your experiences, the ways in which you grow and transform. In this way, the protean self is a reflection of life itself. Life is a constant flow, a never-ending process of change and renewal. Just as you are shaped by the experiences you encounter, you also shape yourself through those experiences. The protean self is not a passive recipient of change, but an active participant in its own evolution. This concept of identity challenges the idea that you must be one thing, one fixed entity. It asks you to let go of the need to define yourself with finality. You are not bound to a single identity. You are a process, a flow, a journey that is always unfolding, always shifting, always creating new versions of yourself along the way. Yet in all this fluidity, the protean self retains continuity. It is not a random series of changes, but a coherent flow that links each new version of yourself to the one before. The protean self is both a collection of moments and a unified whole, a self that evolves but remains connected through time. As you think about your life, you may see this protean self reflected in the way you have evolved. Your thoughts, beliefs, and passions have changed, perhaps in unexpected ways. You are not the person you were 10 years ago, but you are still the person you have always been, growing, evolving, adapting to the world as it changes around you. In many ways, the protean self offers freedom. It frees you from the pressure to be consistent, to be fixed, to remain the same. It allows you to embrace your capacity for change, to experiment with different aspects of your identity without fear of losing yourself. The protean self is a journey, not a destination, a process of becoming, not a state of being. But this freedom also comes with a question: if we are always changing, always evolving, can we ever truly know ourselves? The protean self is an invitation to explore, to discover new parts of yourself, but it also asks you to consider what remains constant in the face of all this change. What, if anything, is the core of who you are? The protean self reminds us that identity is not an object to be found, but a process to be lived. It is not something fixed or final, but something fluid and dynamic. You are not one thing, but many things, each version of yourself adding to the richness of your identity, a self that is always in motion, always becoming. And so, as you move through life, you can embrace the protean self. You are not defined by who you were, nor confined to who you might be. You are a living, breathing process of change, a self that flows and shifts with the currents of time. In that, perhaps, you will find your truest self, ever evolving, ever new, and always becoming. You sit quietly, reflecting on the idea of who you are. The thoughts, memories, and feelings that make up your life swirl within you, forming an image of self. But what if that image is not a single, unchanging thing? What if instead your identity is a collection, a bundle of experiences and traits? This is the bundle theory of self, a concept that suggests our identity is not a singular, unified essence, but a collection of experiences, actions, and traits that come together to form what we think of as the self. You are not one thing, but many things, brought together in a loose collection, constantly changing and shifting. In this view, the self is not a fixed entity, not a constant, unchanging core. Instead, it is a bundle, a series of interconnected experiences, memories, desires, and actions. There is no central you holding everything together. Rather, your identity is the sum of the many pieces that make you who you are. At first, this might feel unsettling. We are so used to thinking of ourselves as a single unified being, a constant thread running through our lives. But the bundle theory asks us to let go of that idea, to embrace the notion that we are more like a collection of moments, a series of experiences stitched together over time. Think of your memories. Each one is a thread in the fabric of your life, but none of them are exactly the same. Some are vivid, some are blurry, some are tied to specific places, people, or events, while others drift away into the background. Yet they all form a part of your identity. They come together to create the you recognize. But the bundle theory challenges the idea that these experiences form a continuous, unbroken self. Instead, it suggests that identity is a constantly shifting collection, a bundle of moments that may not be neatly tied together. There is no central self that defines all these parts. There are only the parts themselves, coming together and dissolving in the flow of life. As you reflect on your life, consider how different experiences have shaped you. Perhaps you once thought of yourself as a shy person, but a series of events, some small, some profound, has made you more confident. The shy self and the confident self exist in the same person, but they are different threads, woven together into the fabric of your identity. This idea suggests that the self is not defined by any single trait or experience. You are not a shy person or a confident person. You are a bundle of both and more. Your identity is not a fixed set of characteristics, but a fluid collection of experiences that change with time, shifting as you move through the world. The bundle theory invites us to consider the complexity of who we are. Identity is not a simple story, a clear-cut narrative. Instead, it is a tapestry of moments, experiences, desires, and actions, each adding depth and nuance to the person you are becoming. There is no single version of you. There are many, each part of the bundle. What happens when we try to separate these parts? If we look at each memory, each experience, as distinct and separate, can we still recognize the self? The bundle theory suggests that our sense of self comes from the way these parts are connected, not from the individual experiences themselves, but from the relationships between them. This connection between parts is not fixed. The bundle theory tells us that identity is a process, a constant recombination of experiences. The person you are today may be different from the person you were yesterday, not because something essential has changed, but because the bundle has shifted, new experiences adding to the collection. In this way, the self is fluid, dynamic, and always in motion. Your identity is not something you can hold on to. It is always unfolding, always reassembling itself. Each new experience adds a new thread to the bundle, creating a version of you that is always becoming, always growing. There is no final version, only a continual process of change. But if identity is a bundle of experiences, what happens when a part of that bundle disappears? What happens when you forget a memory, when a part of your past is lost or altered? The bundle theory suggests that even when parts of the bundle shift or fade, the self remains a collection, always in flux, always adapting to the changes around it. Consider the possibility that your identity is never entirely stable. You may be the same person in many ways, but you are also always different, always evolving. The bundle theory shows us that identity is not a final destination, but a journey, a series of moments that are constantly being woven together and reshaped by the passage of time. This process of change and reassembly does not make you less real or less authentic. Rather, it reveals the complexity of who you are. You are not one thing, but many. The sum of your experiences is what creates the person you recognize as yourself, but it is also what makes you unique, always shifting, always in motion. In a world that often demands certainty and fixed definitions, the bundle theory offers a different way of seeing identity. It invites us to let go of the need to define ourselves in rigid terms. Instead, we can embrace the fluidity of who we are, the constant reshaping of our identity through the experiences that make up our lives. Perhaps in the end, identity is not about finding one stable, unchanging self, but about embracing the bundle, the collection of experiences, moments, and actions that define us. We are not defined by any single part of the bundle, but by the way they come together to form the ever-changing, ever-evolving person we are. So as you reflect on who you are, consider that you are not just one thing, but many. Your identity is a collection, a bundle, a tapestry of experiences and memories that come together to shape who you are. You are not fixed but fluid, always becoming, always unfolding, always part of the bundle. You sit in silence, thinking about who you are. The thoughts you hold about yourself feel real, yet they are also constructed, shaped by the stories you tell. What if identity itself is nothing more than a narrative, a fiction we create to give meaning to our lives? This is the essence of the fictionalist view of identity. The fictionalist view suggests that our sense of self is not rooted in any essential fixed truth, but is a story we weave together to make sense of our existence. According to this view, identity is like a character in a novel, one that takes shape through the actions, thoughts, and experiences we assign to it. But what happens when we see ourselves as a story rather than as a stable being? In the fictionalist view, identity is not a discovery, it is an invention. The you that exists today is not something preordained or fixed, but something created in response to the events in your life. The narrative you construct about yourself is an interpretation of those events, shaped by your own perspectives and the meanings you attach to them. Each day, you add new chapters to the story of who you are, rewriting parts of the narrative with every experience, every thought, every encounter. The self is not a static entity, but a constantly evolving fiction, written in the present moment and shaped by the passage of time. You are the author of your own identity, yet the story is never finished. This view invites us to consider the role of language in shaping who we are. We speak of ourselves in the first person, using words to define our feelings, our goals, our history. But these words are not truths. They are fictions, created by us to make sense of our lives, to give shape to the vast, unspoken experience of being. The fictionalist view tells us that there is no essential I, there is only the story of I that we tell. The fictionalist view challenges us to let go of the search for an unchanging eternal self. There is no hidden essence waiting to be uncovered. There is only the narrative we construct. Who you are is not found by peeling back layers or digging into the past, but by recognizing the story you have told and continue to tell about yourself. But what does it mean to live as a story? To understand identity as a fiction is to embrace the idea that we are always in the process of becoming, always crafting the next chapter. In this view, the self is not fixed but open-ended. You are not defined by what you have been, but by what you choose to become, by the story you are willing to write next. The fictionalist perspective also asks us to reflect on the power of perspective. A story changes depending on who tells it, how it's told, and the context in which it's shared. In the same way, your sense of self can shift depending on the lens through which you view your own life. You are not one fixed identity, but a fluid narrative shaped by your perspective. If identity is a fiction, then what are we really? Are we just characters in a story, without substance or meaning? The fictionalist view does not deny the reality of our experiences, but it suggests that the meaning we attach to those experiences, the way we define ourselves, is something we create, not something inherently existing outside of us. Consider how your identity has changed over the years. Perhaps you once thought of yourself as shy and reserved, but now you embrace your outgoing nature. This shift is not the discovery of a hidden self, but the rewriting of a narrative, the creation of a new chapter in the ongoing story of who you are. The fictionalist view of identity also highlights the role of society in shaping our self-concept. We are not isolated storytellers. Our narratives are shaped by the interactions we have with others. The stories we tell about ourselves are influenced by the culture, the language, and the expectations that surround us. We are both the authors and the readers of our own identity. But if our identity is a story, how do we know when it is true? The fictionalist view tells us that truth in this context is not about finding an objective reality, but about the coherence of the narrative. A well-told story is one that makes sense within the context of the life you lead, one that aligns with your experiences, your values, and your relationships. This view also invites us to embrace the possibility of change. If identity is a fiction, then there is no need to hold on to a static version of yourself. You can rewrite your story, change your goals, shift your perspectives, and redefine who you are at any given moment. The fiction of selfhood is not limiting, it is liberating, offering endless opportunities for transformation. The fictionalist view also raises questions about memory. Our memories are the raw materials from which we construct our identities, but they are not objective records of the past. Memory is selective, fluid, and shaped by our present selves. What we remember is not necessarily what happened, but what we have chosen to include in the ongoing story of who we are. In embracing the fictionalist view, we may find a new freedom in understanding identity as something fluid and creative. Instead of seeking a definitive answer to the question, "Who am I?" we can allow ourselves to be the authors of our own stories, crafting a self that is not rigid, but ever evolving, ever adapting. This view also encourages us to let go of the pressure to find a single, unified self. Identity is not a problem to solve, but a story to tell, one that is constantly unfolding. You are not defined by one moment, one memory, one decision. You are a collection of moments, each contributing to the narrative of your life. Perhaps the greatest gift of the fictionalist view is that it allows us to experience life as a journey, not a destination. Identity is not something to be found, but something to be created, day by day, choice by choice, moment by moment. In this sense, the story of who you are is never truly finished. It is always unfolding, always open to new possibilities, and so, as you drift into sleep, let go of the need to define yourself, to pin down who you are. Embrace the fluidity of identity, the possibility that you are always becoming, always changing. Your story is yours to write, and with each passing day, a new chapter begins. Your self is not fixed, but a tale that never ends. You sit quietly, lost in thought. The mind, it seems, is so often seen as something bound within the body, contained in the confines of your skull. But what if the mind is not so limited? What if it extends beyond you, into the world around you, shaping who you are in ways you cannot yet fully grasp? This is the extended mind thesis, a fascinating idea that suggests our cognitive processes do not reside solely in our brains, but are spread out into the world around us. The mind, according to this theory, is not confined to the body, but extends through our interactions with tools, objects, and even other people. In this view, you are not simply the sum of what is inside your mind, but the sum of your interactions with the world. Imagine for a moment that your thoughts are not just a product of your brain, but are connected to the environment you live in. The notebook you carry, the smartphone in your hand, the conversations you have, all these are part of the extended mind, forming a bridge between you and the world. What if your mind is more connected to the world than you realize? This concept invites us to rethink how we define the self. If the mind extends beyond the body, then who you are is not just determined by what you think or feel within, but by how you interact with everything around you. Your identity is shaped not just by your inner world, but by the objects and relationships you engage with daily. The extended mind thesis challenges the traditional boundaries of the self. It suggests that we are not isolated beings with minds contained within us, but part of a larger system. The mind flows through tools, through people, through the environment itself, extending beyond our immediate perception of who we are and how we experience the world. Consider how you use a pencil to write your thoughts, a phone to record your memories, or a map to navigate your journey. In these simple acts, your mind is extending beyond your body. You are not just the thinker, you are the thinker with tools, with aids that shape and direct your thinking in profound ways. This idea invites us to consider that we are always interconnected with our surroundings. The tools we use, the people we interact with, the environments we inhabit, they all become extensions of our cognitive processes. Your mind is not just what is inside your head, but also what is around you, interacting with the world, shaping your thoughts, your perceptions, and your identity. In this sense, the extended mind thesis blurs the line between the internal and the external. What we often think of as separate, our minds and the world, are not as distinct as we might assume. The boundary between the two is fluid, intertwined, creating a shared space where the mind and the world are in constant interaction. Perhaps the most profound implication of this theory is the idea that identity is not something fixed, not something internal that we possess and protect. Instead, identity is something that exists in relation to the world, shaped by the tools, the experiences, and the people we encounter. Your identity is a process, always influenced by the external world, always interacting with what is around you. The extended mind thesis also raises the question of what it means to be you. If your mind extends beyond the body, then what happens when the tools you rely on change? If the smartphone you once used to remember things breaks or becomes obsolete, does your sense of self shift? What if the environments you inhabit change drastically? How does that alter your mind, your identity? Consider a memory. It might be something you recall from the past, something held deep within your mind. But in many cases, the memory is supported by external tools, photographs, journals, digital records that help shape and guide the recall. In this sense, memory is not just something inside your mind, but something you construct with the help of the world around you. This understanding of the extended mind also invites us to think about consciousness differently. What if consciousness is not just something that happens within the confines of our brain, but something that arises through our interactions with the world, through the use of external tools, through the connections we form with others? Our awareness of who we are, of our thoughts and actions, is shaped by the larger environment we are embedded in. In this light, identity becomes a dynamic, ever-evolving process shaped by the world around us. The self is not a static thing we possess, but a relationship we maintain with the tools, the environments, and the people that help shape our experiences. Your mind does not exist in isolation. It is always interacting, always flowing outward into the world. In this view, the self is not something fixed or confined to the body. It is a fluid entity, shaped by the ongoing interaction between the mind and the environment. The self exists not just within, but in the spaces we occupy, in the objects we interact with, and in the relationships we form. Your mind is always extended, always reaching outward. The extended mind thesis invites us to embrace a new understanding of what it means to be human. You are not just your thoughts, your feelings, or your memories. You are also the tools you use, the people you connect with, the spaces you inhabit. Your mind flows outward, creating a network of interconnected experiences that shape your identity. And so, when you consider the essence of who you are, remember that you are not an isolated mind, but a mind that extends into the world. Your identity is a dynamic, evolving process shaped by the interactions you have with everything around you. The boundaries of the self are not fixed. They are always flowing, always expanding into the world. You sit quietly, looking around at the world you know. The walls, the objects, the people, everything feels solid, real, and familiar. But what if this reality is not as it seems? What if your mind is simply running a simulation, a projection of something much larger, beyond your own awareness? This is the heart of the simulation theory of mind. Simulation theory suggests that everything you experience, everything you perceive, might not be real in the way you think it is. Instead, it could be a simulation, a model created by your mind to interpret and navigate the world. Your thoughts, your perceptions, your sense of self, what if they are just projections, simulations created by a deeper system? In this view, the mind is not a passive observer, but an active participant in creating the reality you experience. Rather than being a reflection of a fixed external world, your consciousness is a model, a simulation that makes sense of the raw data your senses receive. The you know might not be the true self, but an avatar within a much larger construct. Imagine for a moment that everything you experience, the feelings, the thoughts, the events, are all part of an elaborate simulation. Your mind runs a program that constructs reality in real time, based on the data it receives. The world, the people, even your sense of self, might simply be constructs within this grand simulation, created to help you navigate existence. This idea forces us to rethink the nature of consciousness and identity. If our mind is running a simulation, then our perception of reality is not an accurate representation of the world. It is, instead, a model, a set of probabilities and projections created to make sense of the world in a way that allows us to function within it. In simulation theory, identity is not something that exists independently, but is a construct within the simulation itself. You are not a fixed, isolated entity, but a character within a program, playing a role in a reality that is itself an illusion. The self you know is just an avatar, created by the system that runs your consciousness. This perspective challenges everything we know about reality and the self. If our minds are simply running a simulation, then who are we really? Are we the mind that creates the simulation, or are we merely a part of it? The boundaries of identity blur, and what we once thought of as a stable sense of self becomes a fleeting, malleable construct. The simulation theory of mind also suggests that our consciousness is limited by the parameters of the simulation itself. What we perceive as reality is only a small fraction of what actually exists. Our minds, constrained by the simulation, cannot perceive the true nature of the world outside it. We live within a model, a representation of something much larger. If this is true, then the self becomes even more elusive. You are not defined by a fixed set of characteristics, but by the simulation that runs in your mind. Your thoughts, your desires, your memories, everything you experience is a projection, a construction within the program. Your sense of self is not an inherent truth, but an artifact of the simulation. The beauty of simulation theory is that it frees us from the burden of a fixed, unchanging identity. If we are simply avatars in a simulation, then identity is not a destination, but a fluid experience. You can change, evolve, and adapt within the parameters of the simulation. The you know is always in flux, always subject to the shifting program of the mind. In this view, identity is not a singular, permanent thing. It is an experience, a story told by the simulation that runs in your mind. Each moment is a new set of experiences, a new configuration of data, and the self is simply the construct that emerges from this ever-changing flow of information. Simulation theory also invites us to question the nature of free will. If we are characters in a simulation, are we truly in control of our actions, or are they predetermined by the parameters of the simulation? Are we the authors of our own stories, or are we simply following a script written by a larger, unseen force? Consider the way you make decisions. When you choose something, is it truly your choice, or is it the result of the program running in your mind? Perhaps your sense of free will is simply another projection within the simulation, a construct designed to make you feel as if you are in control, even though your actions are guided by a deeper system. This understanding of identity also forces us to reflect on the nature of reality itself. If everything we experience is part of a simulation, then what is the real world beyond it? Are we living in a constructed reality, or is there something beyond our perceptions, something we cannot access because our minds are limited by the simulation we inhabit? The simulation theory of mind suggests that the world you know is not as it seems. It is a construct, a projection designed to help you make sense of existence. But this does not mean that your experiences are meaningless. They are real within the context of the simulation. The world you live in is real to you, even if it is an illusion within a larger system. In the end, the simulation theory asks us to embrace the fluidity of identity and the impermanence of reality. If the mind is running a simulation, then who you are is not fixed, but a dynamic process, an avatar moving through a world of projections. Your sense of self is not the truth of who you are, but a part of the illusion you navigate each day. And so, as you drift into sleep, consider the possibility that your sense of self is not as solid as you think. The world, your mind, and even your identity might be nothing more than a projection, a simulation of something far beyond your understanding. Perhaps, in the end, identity is simply a dream within a larger dream. Imagine for a moment that the universe is a book, its pages unfolding one by one, each moment a line written in the ink of time. And yet, as the pages turn, there's something curious about how this story began. The ink seems to flow in one direction, a slow unfolding from past to future. But how did the ink come to be? This is the essence of the past hypothesis, a theory that attempts to explain why the universe is as we find it, why we see the world progressing toward increasing disorder, and why time seems to flow in one direction. The hypothesis asks a simple question: how did the universe begin, and why does it seem to move from order to chaos? According to the past hypothesis, the universe started in a state of very low entropy, a perfect smooth beginning, where everything was neatly ordered. Over time, as the universe expanded and evolved, entropy disorder gradually increased, and this is the universe we experience now. It suggests that the future we move toward is simply an extension of the past. But what makes the past hypothesis so fascinating is that it gives us a starting point, a way to understand why the arrow of time moves forward. If the universe began in a state of perfect order, then it must have been the only possible starting point, the singular moment from which everything else unfolded. The future, then, is simply the gradual increase of disorder from that moment. In this view, the past is not just a memory, it is a fixed point, a moment of clarity in the ever-expanding dance of entropy. The present and future are shaped by this initial state, where everything began with low entropy. As entropy grows, the world moves from this simple ordered state toward greater complexity, toward the universe we know today. The idea of the past hypothesis is not just about looking back, but about explaining the flow of time. The universe's transition from simplicity to complexity, from order to disorder, becomes the backbone of time itself. Every moment that passes, every change that occurs, is just the inevitable unfolding of entropy, moving forward from the past's original low-entropy state. If this hypothesis is true, then the direction of time is set. It's a path defined by the increase of disorder, by the spreading out of energy, by the movement from the very orderly state of the past toward the chaotic, uncertain future. The past gives us the rules, and time obeys them, flowing forward like a river always moving toward the sea. But there's something more poetic here. The past, as we know it, shapes us. It shapes everything we observe. And yet, even as time moves forward, it's impossible to fully separate the past from the future. Every present moment is, in a sense, rooted in the history that came before it, an echo of a time when the universe was young and pristine. Consider the way we experience life. We wake up, and each day feels like a continuation of the one before it, a seamless flow from past to present. Yet, in the deeper cosmic sense, time is not seamless. It is divided into moments, each one part of a larger chain, stretching from the early universe to the present and onward to the future. The past hypothesis helps us understand this chain. As time moves forward, entropy rises, and things become more complex. This constant increase in disorder defines everything we encounter. From the way we age to the way systems break down, the world is always moving toward greater entropy. The universe's future is not an unknown waiting to unfold. It is a gradual continuation of the past, a future shaped by the increasing chaos of entropy. But even as the future unfolds from the past, it is not entirely predictable. The universe's tendency to move toward higher entropy means that new patterns emerge, new possibilities arise. The increase of disorder gives rise to new forms of complexity, new possibilities for life, new outcomes, and yet they are still shaped by that original low-entropy state, by the universe's beginning. The past hypothesis also challenges our idea of time as something linear. The past is not just something that happened. It is a specific state from which all things follow, a point in time that determines the flow of everything afterward. It sets the stage for the drama of existence, for the unfolding of the future, the gradual unwinding of the universe's potential. What if time is not just a stream flowing forward, but a thread connected to a fixed point in the past? In this view, the future is not a set of random possibilities, but a continuation of what came before, a story written with the ink of entropy, always moving toward greater complexity. The future may seem unpredictable, but it is always part of the larger inevitable process, and so, as we look toward the future, we realize that it is not separate from the past. It is a part of it, unfolding naturally from the low entropy beginning that the universe experienced. The future we are moving toward is shaped by the past, by the way entropy has increased over time, by the constant push of disorder toward greater complexity. Perhaps this is the beauty of the past hypothesis. It offers us a sense of understanding, a way to trace the flow of time from its origin to its current state. The future is not a random chaotic series of events, but a continuation of everything that has come before. We are not merely participants in time's unfolding. We are part of its grand design, and so time moves forward, guided by the path set in the past, by the increase in entropy. The future is already written, not in detail, but in the broad strokes of disorder. It is a future shaped by everything that came before it, a future we are moving toward step by step, moment by moment, each one connected to the last. In the stillness of a system in motion, there is an inevitable pull toward disorder. A ball bounces on a table, a glass shatters on the floor. These are the manifestations of a universe drawn toward increasing entropy. Yet for every action, there is a question: why does this happen? Could time, in some sense, flow backward? This question is at the heart of Loschmidt's paradox, a thought experiment that challenges our understanding of time's arrow. If the laws of physics are time reversible, why do we only experience a universe that moves from order to disorder? Why does time seem to flow in one direction when the underlying equations do not seem to favor this flow? The paradox is named after the physicist Joseph Loschmidt, who in the 19th century pointed out an unsettling inconsistency. According to classical mechanics, the laws governing the motion of particles are time-symmetric. This means that, in theory, if you reverse the direction of time, the motions of particles would remain the same. Yet in reality, we never observe this reversal. If the laws of physics are so symmetrical, why do we never see events unfold in reverse? Why do we never see broken glasses reassemble themselves or spilled water flow back into a cup? Why does the universe seem so irreversibly tied to the direction of time, toward increasing entropy? The answer, it seems, lies in the initial conditions of the universe. Loschmidt's paradox reveals a deep truth. For time to flow backward, the universe would need to be in an almost perfectly ordered state, a state of low entropy. If everything in the universe were in perfect order, then the universe could, in theory, evolve backward, returning to that state of low entropy. But this never happens. The universe we know is not in a state of low entropy. It started that way, but as time progresses, entropy increases. As entropy rises, the universe becomes more disordered. This progression from order to disorder is what we experience as the forward march of time. Time's arrow, in this sense, is the result of entropy's unyielding increase. Loschmidt's paradox is not just a puzzle about time, it is a question about the very fabric of reality. If the laws of physics are time-symmetric, why does the universe behave as if time is one-directional? The paradox forces us to confront the possibility that the past and the future are not symmetrical, but are shaped by the universe's initial state. In a universe of perfect symmetry, Loschmidt's paradox would not exist. Time would not flow in one direction. It would fold upon itself, with events unfolding backward just as easily as they unfold forward. But the universe is not perfectly symmetric, and this symmetry breaking gives rise to the arrow of time we experience. Every moment of time seems to carry us away from a state of low entropy, toward greater complexity, toward greater disorder. But the paradox remains: if the laws of physics allow for time's reversal, then why don't we see it happen? Why do we never witness the universe retracing its steps, returning to its original state? The answer may lie in the conditions that set the universe in motion. The universe began in a state of low entropy, a moment of perfect order. This state, however, is not naturally replicable. As the universe evolves, entropy increases, and the complexity of the world grows. Time's arrow, then is not inherent to time itself, but to the conditions of the universe. This understanding of entropy and time's direction suggests that the flow of time is not just a product of physics, but of the specific history of the universe. The past, with its low entropy, is a fixed starting point. The future, with its increasing disorder, is an inevitable progression. The paradox dissolves when we recognize that time's flow is not arbitrary, but rooted in the universe's initial state. As we contemplate Loschmidt's paradox, we are reminded that the nature of time is both fragile and profound. The symmetry of the laws of physics may suggest that time should move in both directions, but the reality we experience is bound by the particular history of the universe. The arrow of time is a reflection of this history, an ongoing journey toward greater complexity. The paradox also invites us to reflect on our own experience of time. We are caught in the web of this irreversible process, our lives unfolding within the increasing disorder of the universe. Each moment that passes is shaped by the past, by the initial conditions of the universe. Time flows in one direction because we are part of a system that moves toward greater entropy. In a sense, Loschmidt's paradox asks us to question the very nature of time itself. If the universe is governed by reversible laws, then why does time appear to flow in only one direction? Why do we experience the present as a fleeting moment, constantly shifting into the past? These questions pull at the fabric of reality, inviting us to explore the deeper mysteries of time. As we reflect on Loschmidt's paradox, we realize that time is not merely a clock ticking forward. It is the unfolding of the universe, shaped by the laws of physics, the conditions of the past, and the inevitable increase of entropy. Time moves forward, not because it must, but because the universe started in a state of order and has been moving toward greater disorder ever since. Perhaps in the quiet moments of contemplation, we can see the paradox not as a contradiction, but as a reflection of the complexity of time itself. Time is not a simple flow from past to future. It is a dance of order and disorder, of entropy and symmetry, unfolding in ways that challenge our understanding of the universe. In the end, Loschmidt's paradox does not just reveal the limits of our knowledge about time. It invites us to think more deeply about the nature of time, about the direction of the universe, and about our place within this vast, unfolding mystery. Time's arrow points forward, but its origins are still a mystery, still waiting to be understood. Time is not always what it seems. For so long we've regarded it as a constant, a force that flows with precision, unchanging and relentless. But what if time is not an inherent part of the fabric of reality, but something that emerges, like a ripple on a still pond, from the intricate dance of simpler elements? In the theory of time as an emergent property, time is not a fundamental component of the universe. It is not a force that exists on its own. Instead, it arises from the interactions of more basic, timeless elements. Just as temperature emerges from the movement of atoms, so too does time emerge from the underlying laws of the universe, a byproduct of complexity. Imagine a universe without time. The fundamental particles, governed by their own interactions, move in a perfect timeless state. There is no flow from past to future, no unfolding of events. But as these particles begin to interact, as systems become more complex, time emerges, like a natural consequence of their relationships with one another. In this view, time does not exist independently of the events that unfold. It is the result of the interactions between particles, between forces, between moments. Time, then, is not a passive backdrop against which the universe operates. It is an active property that arises as systems evolve and become increasingly complex. This perspective challenges our basic understanding of time. It suggests that time is not a given. It is not an eternal river that we simply drift along. Instead, time emerges gradually, like a story unfolding, becoming more distinct and meaningful as the universe itself becomes more intricate, more connected, more ordered. The flow of time, in this sense, is a reflection of the interactions between elements in the universe. In the simplest systems there is no time. The passage of time, as we experience it, emerges when complexity reaches a certain threshold, when interactions between components create a structure that can be measured, that can be felt, that can be observed. What does this mean for the future? If time is an emergent property, then the future is not something predetermined, something waiting to unfold according to the laws of time. Instead, the future arises from the present, from the interactions of all the particles, forces, and systems at play. Time itself grows, unfolds, as complexity increases, weaving a path from the present toward the unfolding future. Every decision, every action, every event is a tiny step in the creation of time. In the early moments of the universe, time was nearly non-existent, as systems were too simple for it to emerge. But as the universe grew, as particles collided, as galaxies formed, time began to take shape, gradually revealing itself in the complexity of the interactions that were unfolding. Time, then, is not a universal constant. It is a consequence of the way things come together. It arises out of the interactions between systems, between energy and matter, between cause and effect. The more complex the system, the more pronounced time becomes, as the delicate balance between order and chaos defines the flow from one moment to the next. If time is an emergent property, it also suggests that it may not always operate in the way we understand. In simpler systems, time may be almost imperceptible, barely noticeable, but as complexity increases, time becomes more pronounced, more tangible, more real, until it becomes an essential feature of our experience of reality. What happens when time emerges? The very fabric of reality shifts. In a universe without time, everything would be in a constant, eternal present, unable to unfold or change. But as time arises, events can be placed in a sequence, change becomes possible, movement becomes perceptible. The universe begins to age in the way we experience it, unfolding in a way that gives rise to the future. The future, then, is not a destination that awaits us. It is a process that emerges from the present, just as time itself emerges from the interactions between particles and forces, so too does the future emerge from the present, a consequence of the complex web of events that stretch back through the past. As we consider time as an emergent property, we begin to understand that time is not something imposed upon the universe. It is something that the universe creates, gradually, as its complexity grows. The past, the present, and the future are not fixed positions on a timeline, but part of a continuous process that arises from the relationships between the parts of the universe. This idea raises a deeper question. If time is emergent, could there be universes where time does not exist, or exists in a different form altogether? Could time emerge differently in other realms, shaped by different laws, different interactions, different levels of complexity? The answer, perhaps, is that time is not a universal constant, but a fluid concept, shaped by the very nature of the universe in which it arises. In this light, time is no longer the unyielding force we once thought it to be. It is a creation, a byproduct of the universe's evolution. As systems grow more complex, time begins to reveal itself, gradually moving from the timeless to the tangible, from the possible to the real, unfolding in the wake of the complexity that defines the universe. Perhaps, then, the future is not already written, but is something that arises as time itself emerges. The future is not a fixed destination, but a process that comes to life with each passing moment, as time and the universe evolve together. Time is not a backdrop to the universe, but an integral part of the ongoing dance of creation. And with it, the future is not something that awaits us. It is something we bring into being, moment by moment, as time itself unfolds.